Ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the night's meeting of the Ridgecrest City Council. If I can ask everyone to go ahead and let's begin with our roll call.
Mayor Bruin,
Here.
Mr. Blades,
Present.
Mr. Rajaratnam,
Present.
Mr. Heyman,
Present.
Ms. Breeden. Present. 5 present, we have a quorum.
Are there any changes to the agenda as presented, or do I have a motion for approval?
Hold on, we might, do we have that change?
Apologize, I was not
If it's in the
advised of
staff report, does that make a difference? Do we have to change the agenda?
No, we're good.
We're good?
She'll just announce it when she comes up. We don't have to change the agenda.
Okay, well, then I move that we approve.
Okay, I have a motion for approval. Do I have a second?
Second.
Please vote. Five ayes, motion carries.
Thank you. Can I ask everyone to please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? Chief, welcome back. Ready?
Please join me. Ready? Begin.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Councilman Rajaratnam.
Please join me in prayer if you would. Lord, thank you for giving us this day. Thank you for the opportunity you have given to us to serve this community. Lord, bless each one of us who are present here, Lord, as we discuss matters that are important to this community, Lord. Let there be civility, let there be respect, let there be understanding between each one of us, Lord. Pray for our country, Lord, give the leadership your guidance to rule this country properly. Lord, I pray for the troops who are in harm's way. Protect them from all evil. Once again, thank you for this day and be with us. Let the words of our mouth and the meditations of our hearts be acceptable to you. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.
Amen.
Hold on.
Welcome to our meeting. I'm so glad to see so many of our citizens out here this evening. We are going to begin today with a presentation. We have a couple special guests with us. And I'm going to let City Manager Strand, you go ahead and introduce them, please.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, members of City Council. As you know, beginning in July of 2020, we were notified by Kern County that Kern County had done a cost allocation study, and they were looking at changing the cost of our fire service. What began next was all the small cities got together, and we hired Citygate to do a study for us to find out, to delve into that cost allocation study, and to help us, work with us to negotiate with the county for the best deal for the individual cities. As part of that, knowing that the cost of the fire service to the city was going to go up significantly, I hired Citygate Associates to do an additional study for us, and that was the standards of cover and community risk assessment for the city of Ridgecrest. We knew that due to the cost that there may be necessity to reduce fire services, so we started off by doing an assessment of what our current fire services is and what would be the results of us going to one station from two. So we hired Citygate. Stuart Gary and his team did the study. So I have Stuart on WebEx to present the study. I also have Deputy Chief Zach Wells from Kern County Fire Department. He's also available to answer any specific questions about fire service within the Ridgecrest community. So, Stu, if you want, you may begin with your presentation.
Good evening, Mayor and members of the council and the community. Can you hear me all right?
Yes, sir.
Yep.
Thank you. Ron, would you go to slide number 2, please? Policy choices. I start every briefing and page 1 of the Fire Master Plan studies for cities with the policy choices equation, which not everybody in the audience at home may understand that in the United States, the provision of fire protection is a local control issue. There are no federal or state laws or regulations mandating a certain minimum level of fire and EMS services or what the response time should be. However, heavy mandates on the safety of the firefighters and the public at large. If you do it at all, you must do it safely. So being a local policy decision, communities thus have the level of service they can afford, which they may or may not have enough services based on ability to pay. And that's the constructive tension in deployment, is what is your desired level of service and what would it cost you to deliver that level of fire services? Next, please. With regards to fire service deployment, there's two key things. Try not to use jargon tonight. This won't be sleep by PowerPoint. You have a large report along with this study, obviously. But if you remember nothing else about fire service deployment, it's these two things, the speed and the weight. The speed of the response is that single fire crew strategically spread across a jurisdiction to mitigate routine to modest emergencies within the council's desired outcomes. We'll talk more about outcomes in a few slides. But right now, just understand the neighborhood-based first responder tends to handle small, modest emergencies with that crew, that unit. The weight of attack is the multiple units needed, serious fires, technical rescues, hazardous material spills, multi-car auto accidents where we need more foot soldiers, firefighters, EMTs, paramedics to deliver the level of customer service desired. Next, please. So let's talk about outcome goals. The primary goal, obviously, in local government is a positive outcome. Now, again, comes down to cost. What does a positive outcome mean? And I remind our clients and the folks at home, response does not come from fire trucks. It comes from the appropriate number of firefighters and command staff to deliver the customer service product you desire. That desired outcome drives the level of staffing and response times across your geography. Typically in suburban communities, broadly stated, the two outcomes are to prevent permanent impairment from medical emergencies where possible. So when 911 is called, if you can get a first responder and later an ambulance there in time to stabilize the patient and get them to a hospital for definitive care, that's success. If you can't get there in time, the patient's condition continues to deteriorate. That's not so much of a positive outcome. Might be a rural level of outcome. It might be an outcome that a very, very small community can only afford. But it's not typically what suburban urbanizing areas pick. And then with regards to fires, a building fire is largely a successful outcome as the fire is confined to the room or near the room of origin. Personal possessions, business possessions elsewhere in the building are somewhat salvageable, and the fire doesn't spread beyond the building to other adjoining buildings. Next, please. And let's talk about risk assessment. How do we get outcomes? So if we go to values at risk, we looked in the risk appendix of your study. We took a deep look at what is Ridgecrest? What is there for fire and EMS to protect? You know you have a diverse urban, suburban, and even an emerging rural population out at the edges. Your population density is very different. It can be 500 a square mile to more than 6,500 a square mile in the core. We factored in your general plan projects modest population increases of 1% to 3% over the next decade. Today, you have a little over 12,000 housing units and nearly 900 businesses. You also have critical facilities. What's that? Well, it's the things essential to modern urban life: water, power, telecommunication. It's those nodes and infrastructure that if they fail or were to burn down or be sabotaged, modern society life comes to a screeching halt. And then, of course, you've got your reasons to exist as a community. Every community has cultural, historic, natural resources. Next, please. So when we do a risk assessment, to simplify many pages in the report, we look at those values. We look at how common are the hazards in Ridgecrest. We look at prior emergency incident records and say, well, what's the probability that that hazard regularly or repeats occurs? Then we look at the impact severity. Well, if something goes wrong in a given category, fire, EMS, tech rescue, hazardous materials, what's the impact? Now, a single patient EMS event is a huge impact, but only on the patient and the immediate family or the coworkers. To the community at large, economically, not even noticeable. Major fires, multi-patient issues, fires that damage businesses and tax-paying properties, those can quickly become of economic importance to much, if not the entire community. So we multiply probability by impact severity, and we come up with an overall risk score. Next, please. So in the study, we looked at key risks, and across many studies in the U.S., this is not unique to Ridgecrest. We just don't pick these labels. The standardized methodology, or everybody would say, I'm all high risk or I'm all low risk. So for Ridgecrest, you have a moderate risk of building fires. You do have building structure fires. You have a relatively low risk of vegetation wildland fire in the city limits based on your topography, the climate, and the vegetation. Yes, you have some grass and some high desert plants, but you're not in timber. You're not in heavy chaparral like other parts of Southern California. Hazardous materials come about not only from consumption locally, but transportation through the community. You're moderate for that, and you're moderate for technical rescue. So to sum up, you're like most suburban, smaller, neat communities west of the Mississippi. Relatively newer. You're not 150 years old. You don't have densely packed wood combustible buildings dating to the 18 or early 1900s. You're Southern California proud, and we take that into consideration. Next, please. And so let's move to service demand. So in the 2 years back when we did the study, Station 74 has more calls for service in the core of the city than 77 down to the south, but they each do have appreciable calls for service. Next. If you look at the type of incidents by year, EMS, as it is in most departments, is anywhere from 2/3 to 75% of the emergency service demand anymore. We've tasked our firefighters to be medical first responders. The other types of incidents or anything else that's not EMS or a fire, and then all types of fires are relatively a small count per year. So EMS was growing up through the early pandemic. In many of our clients, it flattened or slowed slightly during the core pandemic, and now it's coming back. And EMS demand to 911 is a function, frankly, of who has health care and who has preventative medicine access and can call an HMO and get themselves to the doctor, or if they're uninsured and don't have a caregiver, many times for non-life-threatening issues, they still call 911. That's the rise of EMS across the United States in public safety. Next, please. If you look at service demand by month, for those 2 years, fairly constant. You need a fire department year-round. In July of 1 year, you had a spike of activities. Could have been tourism, could have been bad weather. We don't look at an occasional big spike or dip and say, aha. You look at the trend over time, and the trend over time is you have a fairly constant demand for fire and EMS. Next, please. If we look at the demand curve by day, you're again very typical of a suburban city. On the left axis is midnight, and on the right axis is 11:59 or midnight. So you have the least calls for service during deep sleeping hours. That's typical, but there's still calls for service. People wake up ill, fires start. In fact, deadly fires are more prone to start during sleeping hours than wake hours. With morning rush hour commuting, the call for service starts to ramp up, reaches what we call the shoulder of the day, where the curve is fairly flat across the top in Ridgecrest. You're pretty much consuming impacts to 911 from mid-morning, about 10 in the morning, through late dinner time, and then it tapers off. Very much a function of outdoor activities, after work, daylight times of the year. But a very normal graph, 24 hours a day, you need something, but there's a high and a low tide into it. Next, please. If you look at simultaneous incident activities, the more populated areas drive EMS calls. Population drives EMS. And in the more populated areas, you have more calls for service than Station 74's area in the core, and again down at 77. But because 74 has more calls for service, 11 call it 12% of the time. If one call for service is open, a second call for service is open. Now that's a concern in a 2-fire crew city, because now I've only got nothing left, or I've only got one truck left. So 12% of the time, 2 of the calls occur in the same time frame. And the odds of that happening are significantly more in Station 74's area. Lightning tends to strike more in that part of the city simultaneously. Let's go look at response time performance. Next, please. And so now, Stu, you talked about risks and outcome. What time matters? How do we as a council design and weigh in on what a quality response time should be? So here's two different charts. They're in full page in the report. I'll talk about them at a high level for a moment. On the left is a curve, which is survival rate when oxygen can't reach the human brain. You might call it a stopped heart. It could be a difficulty breathing. It could be choking. It could be a trauma. It could be any number of things. But if the brain doesn't get oxygen in 8 to 10 minutes, brain death starts to become and quickly becomes irreversible. So 0 minutes is on the left, and the curve goes to the right. Survival rapidly declines once you're outside of that red bar. On the right side is something called the time temperature curve, or the home time fire line. And this is strictly a physics coincidence. From the minute free open flame starts in a room, so not couch smoldering cigarettes or bedding, but when open flame starts in a room, typically the entire room can become heated to the point of igniting everything in the room in less than 10 minutes, more like 6 to 8 minutes, depending on the amount of open flame at the start and what the room is filled with. So first responder response time goals and best practices in the United States are to say, let's get the first responder on scene in time to size up and begin intervention in 7.5 to 8.5 minutes. Because if they arrive after that, the incident's now rapidly deteriorating in terms of the race against the running clock. So brain death, severe EMS crises, open flame, burning in a building are the two time bars. Next, please. So if we look at how response time is in the community, there is a citywide measure here and then by fire station area, but let's just focus on the gray row, the top row. Total customer service, total response time begins with the 911 operator saying, hello, what's the problem? And it ends with the wheels stop at the curb of the first arriving unit. And on the far right, your total response time is to 90% of the incidents. This is not average, to 90% of the fire and EMS more serious incidents. You're getting to 90% of the locations in 11 minutes and 9 seconds. Wait a minute, Stu, you just said a minute ago, best practices are 7:30 to 8.5 minutes. Yes, that's true. But let's talk about how do we get to 11 minutes in Ridgecrest? Well, first of all, as the report will go into some detail on, the dispatch processing time is too long by almost 2 minutes. And the turnout time is too long by about 48 seconds. So through continuous improvement strategies and focus, public safety have to reduce both the dispatch processing and the turnout time. But cumulatively, those barely get you below or to about 9.5 minutes. The real problem with only 2 fire stations and the size of Ridgecrest is the driving time, the travel time to 90% of the emergencies takes 6.5 minutes. So even you would have to have dispatch and crew hearing it, getting properly equipped with safety clothing and moving. You'd have to do all that in just 1 more minute, which is physically impossible given the travel. And the only way you would lower travel time in Ridgecrest would be to add a 3rd fire station. Talk more about that at the end. We're not suggesting that's tomorrow's solution. But certainly travel time is a headache in the data, and most of my smaller clients share that headache. Next, please. So your then question is, well, okay, 90% of the time it takes us 11 minutes. If best practice travel time is 4 to 5 minutes, how are we doing at the 4th or 5th minute? And this bar graph says, well, by minute 4, that's the peak of the curve, you've gotten to many of the calls, maybe half the calls. In the 5th minute, you're coming down the curve, you get to another good handful of the calls. But then you have that 6th and 7th minute bar, and to a lesser extent, the 8th minute, where the calls are just too far from one of the 2 fire crews to get to quickly. And that's what drags your 90th percentile measure hour to the 11-minute point. Yes, you're getting to many of the callers within best practices, but not everybody based on where they're physically located to the fire truck at the time. Next, please. Now let's talk about, well, even if I get there, what do I get there with? Is it one firefighter? Is it two? Is it 25? So the report goes into what's called critical task descriptions. And this is one long table split in half just because of PowerPoint. Don't expect you to read it on the screen. But what we talk about is from the first arriving unit to the last due multiple units on a building fire, how many things have to be done against the running clock, because the time's running. From the moment it's noticed and 911's called, you're racing the clock. So we go through all the tasks necessary to control a fire. And the sum of all the tasks, including command, safety, hooking up to a water supply, hose lines, ladders, getting hot smoke and gas out of the building, turning off the utilities to the building to make it safe for the firefighters to not encounter burning electrical equipment. It takes 16 firefighters in about 11 and a half minutes from 911 saying, what's the problem, to bring a common house fire to a standstill. Not out, but beginning to get it really controlled and contained to where they found it. It takes 16 firefighters doing things simultaneously. You say, wow, that's a lot of people. Yes, it is. What happens if I only get half that number of firefighters? Well, it's like playing football with 5 instead of 11 is my metaphor. I can only do one thing. I can't fake a pass, block a run, and then do something else. I'm either going to go into life-saving rescue mode and not put water on the fire, or I'll try to put water between the victim and the fire. I'll try to save contents. I may have to secure utilities first before I can enter with a hose line. Some trade-off tactically will be necessary if I don't get enough people there. So again, boots on the ground in an appropriate time frame matters. Next, please. So we went into your building fire record, and the report states for the folks at home, you currently have 2 fire stations, mostly staffed with only 2 per engine. There's occasional times of 3, but most of the time you're staffed 2 and 2 for a total of 4 in the city limits. So when we look at the structure fire record, well, how bad were 2 years of structure fires? You had roughly 36 occurrences, a little over statistically, 1.5, 1 1/3 per month. 48% of the fires were confined to the room of origin. So almost half the fires, the small crew, the fire was so small when they got there, they could keep it to the room of origin. But the 2 apparatus only handled 2% of the fire. They maybe stopped it, but they couldn't fully control it, much less make the building safe, treat patients, etc. 3 to 5 fire trucks handled only 22% of the fires. Another 8% were handled by fewer than 4 personnel. So overall, 49% of your fires were handled by 11 to 20 personnel. Where did they come from? They came from a distance from other county fire stations. Next, please, Ron. So let's summarize this quick travel through fire deployment and Ridgecrest. You do have a significant rate of serious building fires, and you need to have, in our professional opinion, international best practices and publications, a standby fire department. If you were to say, nope, we're going to exit the fire department business, you're going to experience fire loss, even if 60% of the incidents are EMS. We were then tasked by the city to say, well, what if we only had 1 fire station? And we evaluated statistically in some depth if 74 were closed or 77, but 77 is also important to the county. The bottom line was if either station were closed, but let's pick on 74 up north, if you didn't have that station, 57% of the incidents would be more than 1.5 miles from a fire station. And the insurance service office that does underwriting for fire insurance would call that a rural level of service and staffing. If that's all you can afford, you could only have Station 77 and economically cooperate over who staffs it, perhaps. We then took the flip and said, if 77 were closed, fewer fires and EMS events, but they're much further from 74. The travel times, again, reach a rural level of service. Next, please, Ron. So our concluding recommendations are, as revenues permit, the city should strive to continue operating at a minimum of 2 stations with the current staffing of 2, but it really needs to be 3. At a minimum, those moderate but severe, serious becoming emergencies, just fielding 4 is barely a finger in the dike. And it's barely sufficient under federal and state safety laws to send firefighters into a burning building, which takes a minimum of 4 people. So if I have 2 firefighters to send inside, I have to have 2 outside for command, water supply, et cetera, and be ready to rescue the 2 inside. I'm basically with 4 people, I only can do one thing. More so if it's just to enter, if it's going to enter a burning building. We found the city and the county are always going to be codependent on each other for joint responses to serious multi-unit emergencies. Long-term, a build-out of Ridgecrest, if your economics permit, a city your size, contemporary across the western U.S., would have at least 3 fire stations with 4 units on duty, 3 fire engines, and a modestly sized ladder truck. They would all be staffed with 3 each. That would give you a minimum of 12 personnel per day plus a command chief. That sounds like a lot more people than you have today, and it is. But it's also not 15 or 16 to fight a building fire without calling in mutual aid from the county. So even if you could grow economically in the years ahead to field 3 stations with 9 or 12 on duty, you're still never probably going to field an effective response force to a serious building fire that you can do it all by yourself. Next, please. So next steps, as your city manager and I and the fire department can take your questions. Tonight, we're not asking you to do anything other than review the recommendations of the report and ask the questions you'd like to. And then in the coming months, the city manager will come back for policy direction as to the level of fire service that's desired to be funded. So we've given you an in-depth, a data-driven review of your needs, risks, and what outcomes and response times could be. And now begins the policy discussion process, if not the revenue discussion process, with the members of the community. What level of fire services are they comfortable with, and what could that cost them? Thank you very much for the attention. You can stop the PowerPoint, Ron, if you'd like to.
Well, thank you, sir. That was a very interesting presentation. We'll go ahead and begin with council comments, and then, but I'm going to give Ron an opportunity first before council. Is there anything that you want to add that wasn't said from this process?
No, I think we approached it from the point that we knew we were going to have a fire service question. And so we had the report prepared so the community could review the report, could have the opportunity one day to be able to ask questions of the experts. So it just wasn't the city manager, the city council talking about fire service levels. It was actually getting an independent review of where we sit currently and what that may look like in the future, depending upon where we go.
Fantastic, sir. Thank you. So I'll go ahead and start right to left. I'll let Peggy go first, and we'll go down the line.
I had a question last time when we made this presentation, and I wasn't able to get an answer that I was totally satisfied with because it reflected insurance companies' involvement, and you all said you couldn't answer it. But let me phrase it a little bit differently this time and see if you can help me understand. When you said if we are unable to meet those minimum levels that are required and we shut down to 1 station, or we don't have the second station usable at a time, the people that are farther away from those stations would then pay more for their fire insurance, thus subsidizing those of us who may live closer and would pay less. Is that a fair assessment of where we are?
Stu, do you mind taking a stab at that?
Sure. It's a really good question. And in a complicated sense, you ended up commonsensically with the answer. Although the way insurance rates and premiums work in California, there's not a direct subsidy inside the city limits of Ridgecrest, right? But yes, if you have a rural level of service, you're going to pay more for insurance, if you can even get it, than someone within a mile and a half of a staffed, quickly able to respond fire station. More so if that neighborhood has plumbed fire hydrants and it's not a rural area where firefighting water has to be hauled in. So insurance underwriting in America is given on a classification system, 1 being the best, 10 being nothing. And premiums are evaluated either in bands of classes or by a single class number, depending on underwriting rules in the community. And underwriting rules take more into account than building fires. That's wildland fires, it's other perils and risks, it's water, storm damage, it's everything. Single family homeowner, the percent of premium that goes to fire is relatively small. Most insurance agencies will tell you that most of the premium goes to other perils, liability, workers' comp, et cetera, because of the relatively lower rate of fire in most Western communities. Commercial business owners can get a better premium with sprinklers, detectors, and lots of employees around to notice things going wrong. So that's very simply said, staff and we, because of the way California insurance regulates how premiums are collected and charged, we really can't tell you in Ridgecrest, if you do X to fire services, exactly Z premium damage will occur. It's much more conceptual.
Let me follow up here if I may, okay? One of the things that I see, maybe subsidizing was not the correct term I should have been using, but let me say this. If I live further than the mile and a half away from whatever station, if one of them is closed, the fact that I am going to pay more and someone else would pay less, whether it be for fire or total insurance, is that equitable? And is it always done that way?
If I could, that's the economic result. And I didn't use the word when I discussed station closures, but I do others, and you just hit it, equity. So when a client says, is it equitable to have very differing levels of response time? Our answer is no. Wouldn't you want everybody for a given zoning population density across your city to have fairly equitable access to a first responder in the number of minutes to deliver the same level of customer service? Because they're all paying about the same general taxation, right? Single family, subdivision, 2, 3, 4 family households, small buildings like that. They all pay about the same thing in property tax. And of course, there's sales tax and other things. But we would, yes, say that you're delivering an inequitable level of service to the outlying neighborhoods. They're going to wait longer for fire and EMS services.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Raymond?
So I just have a little question. Do we know what the average timeframes that it takes for outside county response to the multi-unit emergencies? And if so, how that factors into other communities and their outside response to their multi-unit emergencies?
We have the data in the report. Let me have the chief tell you generally. But when we studied both countywide fire services to the contract cities and also did this plan in Ridgecrest, Yes, we know how long it takes depending on where in Ridgecrest vis-a-vis the county station and if it's staffed or not. But if it's not 74 or 77, given your location, it's not in the next 4 minutes either. Chief?
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Gary, and to the mayor and council. Thank you for having me tonight. My name is Zach Wells, Deputy Chief with the Kern County Fire, and I've been before your council before. I apologize for not being able to be in person. But I also have Division Chief Billy Steers with you today as well, and I can speak to the what we find as the best solution with the regional fire protection services that Kern County Fire provides outside of Station 74 and Station 77 inside the city limits of Ridgecrest. Our closest station is Station 73 in Inyo Kern, which would average 10 to 15 minutes, depending upon the location of the city, just travel time. So not including the dispatch and turnout time that Mr. Gary was alluding to in what we would consider total response time. Our next station, our fourth station, is Station 75 in Ransburg, and we're looking at an additional 15 to 20 minutes for them to reach the city limits, depending upon where in the city the call is. Every structure fire, which we call a reinforced structure fire, you're going to get 5 units. So where you really start to see that inequity is that 5th unit now is coming from South Lake in Lake Isabella, and you're reaching 50 minutes to 60 minutes for them to respond code 3 lights and sirens all the way from Lake Isabella into the city of Ridgecrest in order to provide backup or a full response.
And so do those times, how do they factor with other like communities? Are those longer times, or I mean, just in general, are those longer times or shorter times?
Every community is very unique and distinct, and I'll let Mr. Gary tag on to my comments. But in the city of Ridgecrest, our community is unique in the sense that we don't have assistance coming from the east. San Bernardino County Fire is the closest fire department to the east, and they actually contract for services with Kern County Fire Department so that we assist them along the 395 corridor because there is not another fire department coming. So it's hard to compare exactly because the city of Ridgecrest is different than the city of Tehachapi. But when you look at something like the city of Taft on the west side, you find something somewhat similar where we have 4 stations within very close proximity. And then when you start getting into the 5th station, it starts to get a little bit more spread out.
Okay, thanks. Because I guess what I'm looking at is, based on what we have for the current stations and within the community, and when you look at the minutes versus life-saving scale of it, that the gap starts widening pretty quick if we don't have that availability of the firefighting team within the community, and relying on the outside units to come in. That gap starts widening and the time frames spread, which ultimately leads to increased worse fires and increased death numbers as a whole. Correct?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And to take it a step further, besides minutes in our industry, we go to seconds because seconds are what save lives. And it's that what Mr. Gary alluded to, what we concentrate on is the speed and the weight of the response so that we're providing an effective firefighting force to attack a contagion, in this case, fire, or a critical medical emergency where someone's having a life-threatening event, where seconds save minutes, and that is what is ultimately our responsibility, is doing everything in our power to provide a positive outcome for the community of Ridgecrest, so that that they can go about their lives.
Thank you.
Well, first, thank you both for being here. I'm going to just ask one question. Mr. Gary, I just want to go ahead and is it Gary or Gray? I apologize. I did Gary. Okay.
Gary, like Gary.
Got it. I just didn't want to make sure I butchered that. I just want to reiterate one number that you mentioned. 11%. So essentially 1 out of 10 incidents right now are simultaneous calls, which would imply, and you can certainly tell me if I'm mistaken, that 1 out of 10 incidents, whether it be a fire, an EMS, or any other emergency response, right now, if we were to eliminate a fire station, would have a travel time of 10 to 15 minutes to respond to that second call. That's 1 out of 10, correct?
Correct. If that county unit was even in quarters and available. And that's the only county unit closer because of your east and southern flanks. You're an isolated community at the edge of a county. So your cavalry, the outside agencies are not just a mile down across the city limits. So that second call would go unanswered, and depending on what it is, it might not even get a police patrol officer because maybe call number 1 also needed the beat cop.
Yeah, we could imagine the scenario where call number 1 is a traffic accident, and call number 2 is somebody having a heart attack while they're running up College Heights, or while they're on a bike, or while they're having something else, and that second unit is not there for that person. And for me personally, that just is a 1 out of 10. That's too high of a risk for me, for our citizens personally, but I will pass it on to Solomon.
First, I want to thank City Gates for the study. I mean, it gave me a lot of insight, answered a lot of questions I had. So one clarification, so these services are provided by Kern County. So administrative-wise, does the city manager has any authority on them if something happens? So are they responsible to you anyway? Let's say somebody complained that it took more than, say, 20 minutes to come to a place where they had a fire accident. So do you investigate that, or how does that work?
No, that complaint would be handled through the chain of command of the fire department. Our role is we are the contract city. We contract them and give the Kern County Fire Department our ordinance authority to provide fire services to our community. So any issue we would have would be contractual.
Okay, so you don't have any say, so,
No.
okay.
Now, contractually, if they're providing poor service, we could obviously meet with the fire chief, and we would have obviously a contract performance, discussion. But as for the day-to-day operations, we have hired them to handle our fire service.
And I guess we have very cordial relationship with Kern County Fire Department, right?
And we have a very good relationship
Very
with
good
them.
relationship.
Yes.
So this presentation, it's only for our information and discussion, but we already voted on the contract and for the 2 fire stations, right?
Correct.
And that can be changed anytime with mutual understanding?
Well, one of the reasons for the study was we did put language in the contract that the city could request to reduce our fire service to 1 station, because I had no idea, as the fire costs increase, where are we going to fund this from? And I wanted to give the council and the community the opportunity to make that staffing reduction if they chose to. It would not be my recommendation, but we negotiated in the contract just so we could if we had to.
Okay. So a follow-up question to the fire chief. So if there is an incident where a business complained that it took more than, say, 25 minutes or 20 minutes, so do you guys investigate what would be the result of that complaint?
So we have an internal policy on how to handle any complaint, and every complaint is taken seriously and investigated. Division Chief Billy Steers, who's with you today, also has a direct line of communication with City Manager Ron Strand, which I will just compliment City Manager Strand. We do have what I would say is an excellent relationship where any kind of question, if we get a phone call, we will look into it immediately. And what we usually find is, say, let's take this hypothetical scenario where there's a complaint about 20 minutes, is what you find is the research is that the incident, both engines in the city were tied up, and now you have that third engine coming from out of the city. And the reason it took 20 minutes was because of the extended travel time, and no city engine was available from 74 or 77. We would then go to that citizen and explain our findings, and usually we can handle it at the lowest level possible, but we always have a direct line of communication with the city to making sure that we're meeting their needs, their standards that are set forth in the service agreement and contract that we just recently signed last year.
Okay, sir. Thank you. That's all I have.
Kyle, you're up.
Yeah, so for either one, either division or deputy chief, would you mind? So I think we breezed across all the data pretty quickly. I appreciated that. And as much as I'd love to sit here like a nerd and just talk about it for another hour, I don't think everybody else wants to be a part of that. One of those questions I had, if we could just go over real quick, what is the weight that we currently deliver, we as in the city? We talked a little bit about the speed, we talked a lot about response times, how we're getting here to there and percentages, but I don't remember it being clear, the weight we're delivering per incident. So let me break that back down. Sorry if I'm rattling on.
Yep. I'll start out, and Chief Steers, if you'd like to tag on, appreciate any additional info. But the weight of the response in the city of Ridgecrest, currently, our standard is 3 firefighters per fire station or engine. So you have a total of 6 firefighters that are delivering 24/7 service to the citizens of Ridgecrest every day. However, on June 11th, we had a greater alarm emergency. We had a commercial structure fire where we responded 13 fire units. That's fire engines, fire trucks, command staff, and safety officers. And so 13 units, that goes beyond the 2 that you have available in the city. And that goes to the weight. So when you have a risk component, such as a commercial structure fire, it doesn't stop at the 2 engines you currently have. We continue based on a regional model. We will request resources based on the risk that we see. And now it might take them a little bit longer to respond because they're coming from Tehachapi and other areas. But out of 47 fire stations, we have a significant, firefighting force to bring.
I appreciate that.
Just to add to that, with those responses, when we have a significant incident where it takes both the engines out of the city, some of the things we try to accomplish is that move up and cover during that time. So we may have a long duration fire, as one Chief Wells was talking about, but we're also bringing up someone to also respond and assist to those medical aids in that. But that's a trickle down effect. It affects across the county, and so I will move up from multiple different areas in the county to fill behind other engines that I've moved to protect Ridgecrest. So it does happen. You could have a long duration, any kind of different incident, but we'll do some move up and covers that way to continue that service.
Thank you, Chief. Appreciate it. The other question I had, and I guess this is for either one of the chiefs. I don't know if we have data to show. We had a very high rate of medical responses, and I guess that's an overall trend nationally. I don't know if it's if it's increased regionally or what that data looks like, but this is going to seem like an insensitive comment. I don't mean it this way, but what is the severity of those? If we're seeing a large amount of medical responses, are they almost always very very severe calls? Not that that's an easy thing to quantify. And I'm driving to something, believe it or not, guys.
Yeah, so
if I could assist on that, I like it.
Or Mr. Gary.
Yeah, I'd like to use a broader set of demography. Does the department have the clinical data set to go back and deeply answer that question? Yes, they do. But in a broader context of a Southern California suburban community, roughly half the calls do not need paramedics. Another 25% of the calls need one paramedic and will transport to the hospital. 16 to 20, 25% of the calls are life and death requiring two paramedics. So is the critical life-threatening calls smaller than the smallest slice of the pie? Yes, it's that way everywhere, almost without exception in the United States. And yes, you're paying to deploy equitably to all neighborhoods that serious intervention force, whether you use it once a day or 3 times a year. It's just how it breaks down. But many of the calls are not time sensitive in EMS.
No, understood. That's good. Thank you. I have a few more questions. The next one is do you respond like on a triage basis, or is it a first serve basis?
Yeah, I can answer that. So 911 system's based on a first come, first serve basis. That's how it's dispatched. As the calls come in, we dispatch to those. There is a little bit to that is, as the chief officers, we will adjust a call based on other calls that are going on. We may divert some resources based on information we're getting from another call that came after and try to handle both based on what we have coming.
Thank you. No, I appreciate that. I guess my last comment really is that we've looked at all the data, and it appears that, don't mean to correct you, Mayor Broom, but it wasn't just 11, it was 11.7, which is 12% of the time. So 12% of the time calls occur simultaneously. Removing a station, however those trucks and personnel get shuffled, enters an element of chaos almost, because it's going to be hard to quantify then how the community gets best served. Because as we just talked about, you might have trucks outside that could support, you might not. You may or may not have enough trucks in that one station to take care. So you're making a lot of calls. You, the chief, you're making calls on people's lives, basically. So I think that pretty much sums up. You guys asked a lot of good questions, so I think that sums up most of my questions and comments.
Mr. Blades, I got one comment. If you remember the last 2 years, how many life-saving awards that we've handed out to our officers, this is a system. It's a system between the fire department, Liberty Ambulance, and the police department. It is how we who gets on scene first to administer whatever aid first. And you can see that we do rely upon our police department significantly to assist both Liberty and the fire department, not only on medical aids, but on a lot of the fires, just because there is currently a lack of staffing. So we do have our officers that sometimes act like firemen. And so we do have a system in place. And so it is important to keep those numbers where they need to be, because if we start shrinking those assets, then you're shrinking our ability to be able to respond to these incidents.
Yep, absolutely. So I think the study seems pretty clear that it's a bad decision for us to close the fire station.
Well, thank you all. We're going to give a few minutes. If there is any public that would like to make a comment, we certainly welcome the opportunity to address a question. As opposed to comments, these would be questions that would be specific for the presenters. If there's somebody that has a question that they'd like to address, we'll be happy to take it now.
Chuck Rowland for 2125 El Hogar. Yeah, I got like questions all 4 categories. First, I think the top of the food chain is the Kern County Fire Department. And I guess my question to them would be does the Station 77 service accidents on 395 and service all the county properties to the east of Mahan and stuff? Do they service that all the time currently? That's the Kern County? Is this working?
The 395 corridor is a long corridor and serviced by many different fire departments. Besides Station 77, 75 has a majority of the 395, going all the way down to Boron, Station 17. But the one thing I would, as a caveat, with a rescue response or a traffic collision, we in most cases send 2, if not 3 fire engines because of the high mechanism and traumatic nature of collisions on the 395. So more than likely, one engine, if not at sometimes two engines, can be pulled.
Okay, the follow-up, the other part of that question was, but the eastern part of, let's call it, China Lake Acres, whatever you want to call it, that is serviced by 77, everything east of Mahan and out towards, Jack Ranch Road and all those houses out there, would be serviced by Kern County, correct?
That's correct. Correct.
Correct, okay. So if the city did not have a contract with Fire Station 77, would the county close it?
So we would look at the services. Right now, if we were looking at keeping any station open, Station 77 geographically serves the best location. However, I think as what was identified by Mr. Gary in his presentation, this is a scenario that none of us want to even consider at this time because it would be a critical impact to not just the city, but the county as well.
That wasn't an answer to my question. My question was, if the city was not in contract with the county for Station 77, would you close it, yes or no?
Well, so Chuck, the cost would just go up to the county. The cost,
I'm talking to Kern County, please. I'm asking the Kern County people right now.
So we would have to look. I can't give you an answer one way or another without looking at the full scenario at this time.
Okay, that's a question I'd like follow-up on. If we didn't have a contract, how would the eastern part of Kern County to the west of our city be serviced if 77 was not open? I'd like some follow-up on that because this is real. We're talking about public services. We're talking to merge between county and city. So I'm trying to find out. So we can't have that answer. Okay, say if we were not in contract with Fire Station 77, and there was a call inside the city of Ridgecrest, would Fire Station 77 respond?
What we do is provide mutual aid services for like-kind resources. So really to go back to your first question as well, we have Station 73 that would cover a majority of the unincorporated Kern County area, but depending upon many different scenarios, we would still provide reciprocal resources into the city as well.
So let me see if I'm trying to get this correct. So if we did not have a contract with Station 77 with the county, and we had a fire, 77 would still respond to a fire within inside the city, correct?
I think you're opening up many different hypotheticals because right now we look at a contract with the city for two stations, both Station 74 and Station 77. So to say that we didn't have a contract is not something that we could say that we would close or not close Station 77.
Well, again, this goes back to what Councilman Solomon said. We've actually bid the contract. The city's looking at these conversations to interpret, how we want to do this, is my understanding. Is that correct?
Not to interpret how we're doing it. We've already signed the contract.
Right, but Solomon, I think, let me correct you then. Are we locked in this contract for 10 years? If we decide next year as a city that we do not want this contract, can we break it?
Are you talking to us now?
Yes, city.
Okay. So, yes, I started to answer that question a little bit in length. I've been
Appreciate
rattling on. I apologize for that. So the first thing is, as city manager said, the contract can be, because we wanted that in, just in case the citizens decided that this wasn't something that they wanted to fund, then yeah, we need to look at being able to remove a station. So it's in the contract.
Okay, so we can terminate this contract
Sure.
at will. Okay,
Sure.
Okay. Yeah, that's the part of my concern, which I've been trying to express and trying to convey with different people, is that if we need to get the answer from Kern County if they're going to close 77. I don't think we could. Can I finish?
Mr. Rulon, I can probably try and answer a hypothetical where this may go. If we ask to close the station, Kern
we don't
County.
ask to close, just not contract.
Yeah, if we ask to close the station, Kern County has a couple of options. They can close the station because it's not funded and run the whole eastern side out of one Ridgecrest station and Inyakern and Ransburg. They go from 3 to 4. Or they could decide that that is unattainable on their part, and they could cancel and walk away from the contract from us, and then we would have to then start our own fire department with just one station. Would probably be the practical route. So it'd be one of those two options that would result from this, in my view.
Did I hear you correctly?
And I know you're trying to say that we could go to
No,
one
I'm just asking a
station and then
question.
force them to be mutual aid, but that's not how it would work.
I'm just trying to clarify something. You just said that you could ask Kern County to close that station. I'd like to know if Kern County can, you just said that. I mean, obviously it's recorded.
Right.
Do you have the authority to tell Kern County to close 77?
We could negotiate the closure of the station, yes, that's part of our contract. And the county has two decisions. We can negotiate the close, we could close that one station, and they could run the city in the outlying area from one station. Or the county has the ability to say that's unattainable, and they could cancel our contract altogether, and we have to form our own fire department.
Fire department.
Yeah. No, that's not my question. So I guess the question I'd like to
But
put.
sir, I just do want to say, we do allow 5 minutes for each presentation. Your time has ran out. We have been stopping in between the questions. I'll allow one more question, then I'm going to ask the next person up.
Oh, well, I have questions for different departments. I didn't
I'm
know there's a
sorry, so
5-minute, there's a
there's 5
5-minute rule
minutes.
on these discussions here?
There's 5
This
minutes
isn't
for
public
all
comment.
public comment.
Well, I have much more questions on this. I don't think that's appropriate now to have a big presentation for 2 hours, because I have serious concerns about the presentation, why the presentation gave us a scenario and a slide with the closure of 77 to give you a large circumference difference, where they did not have a slide for the closure of 77. The only slide they presented in that presentation was the closure of 74, which is our primary station.
Well, if you remember right, that would be the opinion of Citygate. That wasn't the opinion of Kern County Fire. Remember, this report was done for the city, paid for by the city to Citygate, and when that question was asked, based upon Mr. Gary's review, if there was a station to close, that would be the one to close based upon where your calls for service are at. Now, obviously, that hasn't been, vetted or approved by Kern County Fire, but that was just part of our study.
Yeah, and I'd really question that, this is a serious question. You have a half-hour presentation. And I wish you would have stated 5 minutes before, because I didn't hear the 5-minute ruling before this, because I had some other questions, obviously, to Mrs. Breeden's situation. Well, my first question, Your Honor, there's 2 studies. What did the 2 studies cost the
We'll be
citizens of
happy to get
Ridgecrest?
you in contact with any one of them, and you can feel free to share any other questions. We'll be happy to get you answers.
No, see, this is what you do, Eric. If you don't, in fact, if the city wants to look on May 4th of this year, the mayor let someone talk for 12 minutes and 25 seconds under public comment and did not stop until the city attorney stopped him. 5-4. Okay. So I don't even see a clock running. How am I supposed to know? Did I get 12 minutes?
So the clock was running, Chuck. She
clock was
turned
running.
it off.
Okay, stop.
She gave you extra time.
Let's make it quick then, because I gave this information to Ron Strand, too, from insurance people, and Peggy's asked a question that nobody answered. Peggy's asked a question, if the insurance rates will go up, if the fire station, if we don't have 2 fire stations. That should be an answer. My data, which I gave to Ron Strand from insurance, is there's a 5-mile circumference radius of a fire station, and the 5-mile radius of station 74 has all of the city of Ridgecrest in it. I provided that correct to you, Mr. Strand, correct that data to you. Did you do a follow-up?
We discussed it. I never got an email from
Pardon me?
I never got an email from you from what I recall, but we did discuss that, yes.
I haven't heard any discussion of it here. I haven't heard discussion. Peggy asked a good question, which I like, because her basic, correct me if I'm wrong, Peggy, your question was, is insurance rates going to go up if we don't have this contract? And that should be like a yes or no answer.
No, that won't, because what I was told, and I think that's fair, and I think I've been told this over and over again, even though I keep asking the same question, they cannot control what insurance companies charge.
Correct.
And it is not, and there is no, if I'm wrong, guys, tell me, but it seems to me that the insurance companies make that decision. What I was trying to say and ask generally, is that the case? The further you live away from the fire station, do you pay more for insurance?
That's the question everybody needs answered. Yes, I agree with that. Okay, I'll let this go because I know Eric's getting excited here. But
No, sorry, I've tried to be very polite.
No,
I've tried to be polite. We're now well over 5 additional
Yeah, I'm going to finish up here. My last question.
Continuing, but Sir.
Yeah, my last question would be to Ron Strand. I'd like to know the cost of these 2 studies for the city. You've referenced 2 costs by name, which I can't remember. I'm obviously this consultant here and one previous. I'd just like to know the cost of those 2 studies to the city of Ridgecrest. Thank you.
Okay, I just want to go ahead and state again for the record, our public comment section is 5 minutes of time per person, limited to an hour. We're applying the same rules to our presentation time. We'll be happy to provide an opportunity to speak. Again, we're trying to provide you an opportunity to ask questions. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Good evening, Council. Just a couple of questions in the numbers backing up the statistics. Are any of the numbers in the study included where the fire department has been turned back from a call? Have any of those numbers been included in any of the statistics? Because there's a number of times where the fire department would roll, and then they're turned back, they don't need them, and they're turned back. Are any of those numbers included in this study?
I do believe there was an accounting of those numbers, but I do not believe. Gary, can you answer that one?
Correct. The canceled non-arrivals are counted quantitatively. Response time is only measured by incidents where units arrive.
Okay, so far for the percentage of EMS calls, and let's use 60% as the key, that doesn't include turnbacks then from an EMS call.
Because that's based on response time, that is correct. However, all calls are counted, including the cancels.
Okay, I think I got the answer. One other question is, we do have the situation where most of the calls, especially the EMS calls, and first of all, I want it real clear, I support this fire department, and I think they're doing a great job. So none of my questions are a reflection of the performance of this fire department, period. I want that right there. But a question I have is that a lot of times the fire department rolls the same time Liberty does. Are those, if Liberty gets there first, is that a call out for Kern County Fire, or is it not?
Yeah, that would
Yes,
be considered Go ahead, Chief Wells.
We count our responses separately. So that would be a response for us and a response for them separately.
Okay, so even though Liberty is there, you would continue to respond?
Correct. We have a process at our dispatch center, which we run, and that's called EMD, where we look at the severity of the call, and based on the acuity of the call, say it's an echo, which could be a full arrest, we would dispatch both Kern County Fire and Liberty Code 3 because of the severity. And on the lower severity calls, we also look at low acuity calls and potentially only dispatch Liberty and do not dispatch any engine out of the city of Ridgecrest.
Okay, and please understand, the reason I'm asking the question is the relationship to the statistic used to develop the amount of calls that you make, et cetera. That's why I'm asking the questions.
Totally understand. And the city Liberty ambulance calls are not in this data set.
Okay. And in your discussion about having a major incident, and you gave the report about bringing in the department from Kern, Ransburg, Kern Valley, where is the operational decision made that we have an emergency situation that we have a call to China Lake instead of bringing in somebody from Kern Valley? Who and how do you make that decision?
So you're talking about whether we request assistance from China Lake Fire Department?
Yes, sir.
So we do request on just about every structure fire that would be a larger incident for us that requires a larger response. We do request assistance from China Lake. We don't count them in our 5 that we respond, but they do request, and partly they have their own mission on the base, and so they are not always available when we do request, and whether that be they were participating in what their responsibility is, whether that be a standby for other things that are going on the base. So they're not as always available to us. So it's if they're available, they do respond.
Okay, and I guess my point is that decision, if you got both, let's say it was a major incident, you got both stations taken the call and you need help, do you call China Lake first, or do you go for Kern or Ransburg or outlying?
So on an initial big call, we're going to immediately dispatch our resources right off the bat.
Right.
Then the first in-company officer, whether that be from Station 74 or 77, will notify the battalion chief that one, he's either got a significant incident or working incident, smoke showing. At that point, the battalion chief will request additional out of China Lake. Once we know we have a working incident, we don't want to request them all the time.
I understand.
When it's not, but that's when we request them.
Okay, that was my main concern, was that you wouldn't wait.
No.
You would at least make the request. If they can't come, they can't come. That's
Correct.
one thing. And my final question has to do with, the study was real good, and I like the one page that had the city shown with all the blue lines coming out where all the calls went. That was a pretty good graphic representation of the calls and where they went from each station. But anyway, real quickly but it was mentioned in there, police department uses sworn reserve officers for backup. Sheriff's department uses sworn reserve officers for backup. Why doesn't the fire department look into that? Just to augment, not to replace, but to augment your capability.
I'll let Chief Wells answer this one. The short answer is everyone takes, they have to have the exact same training as the floor firefighters.
Right, same as the police department, same as the sheriff's department. I'm just wondering why the fire department doesn't look at that as a possible way to augment the department.
Mr. Wicknick, on the police department side, there's 3 different levels, 1, 2, and 3. Fire department, there's 1 level. So for you to become a level 1, you have to go through the full academy. And so the training's a little bit different, and I can speak from experience in working reserves. Most of them have full-time jobs and are not reliable enough to be able to be depended upon for significant events. They help, but they're not something you're going to build your base department on.
Yeah, and I'm not saying that it would be something they would depend on, just to augment the capability. I just wondered why the Kern County hasn't made the decision to do that.
Yeah, I'll just jump in real quick and tag on to Chief Steers and City Manager Strand's comments. Is the reserve program is something that we've had in the past, but due to the increasing certification, the training demand for individuals that are holding down full-time jobs, this is something that has been unattainable to meet based on the safety requirements and the evolution of what it takes to be a firefighter. Over the last 30 years, it's incredible amount of specialization skills to not just be a professional firefighter, but a rescue technician, a hazmat specialist, EMT. Our scope just in the basic EMT continues to expand every year. So I think it's just the weight of that that we would need a full-time department just training that, and the cost of people cycling through makes it not efficient or effective versus focusing on our full-time professional firefighters.
Okay, thank you. And again, I compliment the fire department and their service.
Thank you, sir.
Evening, Council. Scott Miller, 341 East Wilson. This information is, I guess, kind of old, but when someone calls 911, my understanding is if it's for fire, it gets dispatched out of Bakersfield, or is it dispatched out of here for the fire department?
The fire department it is dispatched out of Bakersfield.
So to be clear, I called 911 and say my house is on fire. There's going to be a lag time between our local switchboard, wherever it is, to Bakersfield, and then Bakersfield will then dispatch locally.
The lag time, which lag time are you talking about? Because it would be almost instantaneously from your phone call to Bakersfield.
No, because you got to go to Ridgecrest first. It can't be instantaneously. If I'm calling 911, I'm going to go to Ridgecrest dispatch, right?
It does it.
Yes,
Yeah.
for
So it
Ridgecrest
can't-
PD.
Yeah, it initially
and the
goes to
PSAP.
Ridgecrest Dispatch and it's
Right.
transferred to E
Okay.
EMS.
One of the first slides y'all showed, and please know when I say this, I'm not trying to be hypercritical of our dispatch center, was dispatch. Go back and look at that slide. That I think, Chief, you said that was where part of the problem was our dispatch. So when I call 911 and say I have a house fire, it goes to our local, and then our local transfers it to Bakersfield, and hopefully I say I have a fire at 341 East Wilson, and they say, okay, what's across street? They're not local. And I've had that experience when I've called 911 for things in town, and I get to highway patrol. I'm like, I'm traveling right over here on Brown Road. They're like, where? And I'm hoping that's not the issue we're having with our fire department. And I don't know. I don't know if you'd want to answer that question. I don't know if that's a question, but that's something I was thinking about is if we're calling 911, it's going to Bakersfield and then being dispatched, then going to our fire department, and then boots on the ground.
I mean, that's just a symptom of a larger problem. I mean, you have our 911 center in Ridgecrest. Back when I started, all calls, in fact, I don't think we had 911 when I started, but when 911 came on, it was all landline. And then it went to cellular, to where it was, based upon your geo and where you're at. You have to remember because everybody has a cell phone in their hand, if there's an incident, you'll have 10, 15 calls going into dispatch with one dispatcher trying to decipher who has the story. And so you get that, and then you get the 911 transfer. So a lot of this just has to do with our remoteness. And where we're at and where the dispatch centers are at. One of the things that we were discussing, during the budget was, we reduced our dispatcher numbers down back in the Great Recession and have not brought it back. And I will argue that with everybody having a cell phone, now you have, I believe, text messaging that they can, notify dispatch on. Dispatch has gotten extremely busy. So yeah, it is a system. It is a system of how much staffing do you have. We rarely have two dispatchers on at any one time. So you have a dispatcher who's taking the 911 calls and also monitoring the officer's activity and dispatching. So that's part of the issue with getting the units dispatched is the system in place and the staffing effort that's put towards it.
And Ron, that's kind of what I'm saying is
Right.
it's starting locally, and then, like I said,
Well, it has to start locally, yes.
of course, it starts locally, but then it gets farmed out.
Correct.
And then hopefully, and I hate using that word, that dispatch center in Bakersfield is like, oh, they're calling from a cell phone, they're on Brown Road or wherever they happen to be. I don't know how it's working down there. I don't know how it's working up here, but that's when I saw the comment and I heard the comment from the chief about the dispatch center was, I don't remember the number, I want to say 4.5 minutes from calling 911 to roll out. I'm going to move from that. There was a time frame from the 911 call to the fire department stopping in front. And I think y'all said that is just the fire department. That's not PD rolling, as Mr. Strand said. We have PD that rolls out. And I've heard, again, that when we do call for medical, PD also rolls. We can. But those numbers that you showed from the 911 call to curbside, that is strictly fire department. That's not PD showing up. That's not the ambulance. I think that's what you said with the other gentleman that was talking, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Did I understand also that Trona is not part of our...
Scott.
Sorry.
Last question. Last question. Last question.
Not a question?
Last.
Oh, okay, I'm done. Thanks.
Thank you, sir.
If I could just make a quick comment to the last gentleman's question, just to ensure that there's confidence, I oversee our emergency communication center in Bakersfield, and we provide a joint dispatch center, the JPA, between Kern County Fire and Bakersfield Fire. And one of the efficiencies that we see at scale with running one fire department dispatch center in the whole county is the ability to understand where all county resources are at any one time. And I will say our relationship with Ridgecrest PD and them being as a primary PSAP, between us as a secondary PSAP, the delay or time in between transfer is very minimal. And then where we step up with our knowledge in what the process is called EFD, the times that we saw in Mr. Gary's study, and I know he would attest to the same fact, that the times that you see are 90th percentile. And so they're going to be at the very high end, the fringe, and do not accurately reflect all times. And it's just, those are how we understand a standard. But in the sense of critical calls, we impress upon our emergency dispatchers, and they have protocols in place to push out calls faster. But there are times where locations are difficult, and we've been implementing technology at our dispatch center for them to geolocate cell phones based on cell tower locations and landlines in the database that's provided by the state, so that we can accurately respond to the right place at the right time and make sure that we reduce that delay to the minimal point possible.
Thank you, sir. I believe we have one caller on the phone. Is that correct? Huh?
Hello?
Caller, go ahead.
This is Ronald Porter.
Go ahead, sir.
Okay, my first question is, does Ridgecrest pay?
Can you turn down the phone, your TV or your whatever you're listening to at the same time, please, sir?
Yes, I'm sorry. It just didn't work. Does Ridgecrest pay the full cost of stations 74 and 77?
No, we don't. We pay approximately 76% of the full operating costs of both stations.
Okay, thank you. My other question is, how much does the county spend per capita on county employees in this valley versus on the eastern side or the western side?
Are you talking staffing levels?
Well, staffing levels, whatever, per capita in the western part of Kern County versus the eastern part.
That'd be a question for the supervisor, correct? That would be a question for Supervisor Peters. We'll be happy to get you in contact with him.
I think Deputy Chief Wells might be able to answer that one. Basically, he's talking, is there a different staffing level, in other words, number of firefighters per 1,000 people in eastern Kern versus other areas like in Tehachapi and western Kern?
I'll do my best to answer the question if I understand it correctly. We have a constant staffing model, and that's for firefighter safety. The minimum staffing per engine company or truck company in Kern County, no matter the location, is 3 firefighters per engine company. And as a county, we set a goal of 1 firefighter for every just a little over 3,000 population. And I think if you would look at NFPA, it would recommend a little bit lower on the scale. So that would indicate a need for more firefighters in the city of Ridgecrest and in other locations as identified by the Citygate Associates report.
Well, my biggest concern, the real question is, per capita, how much of the service is being used, paid for by that portion that is used by the county, than that portion being used by the city?
Mr. Porter, it's roughly a 24% to the county versus 76% to the city. But if you actually look at the calls for service, 74 and 77 respond to about 92% of the calls within the city of Ridgecrest and about 8% in the outlying county area. So majority of their work is within the city.
So basically, you're looking, well, I'm looking at per capita, though, but I understand that. Because too many things on this side of the Sierras, we don't get the service that we should for the dollars. That's just my opinion over the years. That's all the question I had. Thank you very much. Oh, I do have one more thing to say. Are you still there?
You're still on your clock, sir.
Okay. you need to look at something. There's a difference between public comment and public questions. Because this is a presentation, and unless there's a need, I don't see any reason to ever limit public comment or public questions. Under the statute, there's a difference, and I just think you need to be aware of that. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Okay. Any other questions? Okay. Mr. Gary, our proud firefighters, thank you for your time. Thank you for being here and for sharing your presentation.
You're welcome.
And just for information, this fire study is currently posted on our city webpage. So I would encourage the public to go there and take a look at it. If they have any questions, let us know.
Agreed. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Next on our agenda is our public comment session. Public comment of items not on the agenda. Persons wishing to address the council on matters that are within the council's jurisdiction and do not already appear on the agenda may do so at this time pursuant to the Brown Act. The city council may not take action on any item that does not appear on this agenda. Speakers are limited to 5 minutes, and the public comment section of the agenda is limited to a total of 1 hour. And each speaker is asked to please state their name and their name. Is there any public comment for items not on the agenda?
Yeah, I guess my public comments now is on the new proposed tax. And I do want to thank Solomon and Kyle for, giving me quite a bit of their time over the weekend on some of this stuff. I'm just trying to get some, I'm not talking about what it's going to be used for. I'm just trying to get down to the basic finances of it. I want to make sure that, clearly now, Measure V, we collect basically $5.9 million per year. Is that correct, Mayor?
I can actually give this the exact, is that about right? Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Okay, so then if we have a new 1% tax, and I'm talking local specific, I'm not talking anything to do with the county portion or the state portion of our sales tax. I'm just talking after the 7.5%, that new 1% city tax we'll have will be another $5.9 million, correct?
Would be estimated to be roughly the same, yes,
Okay,
sir.
so I'm gonna make sure this is a 100% increase, correct? We're basically doubling our local specific sales tax?
Local sales tax would go from 8.25 to 9.25, a 12% increase.
No, that wasn't my question, please. My question is, are we doubling our local specific sales tax? I mean, obviously I have numbers from different councilmen that verify that.
Our local sales tax, which has a cap limit of 2% by state law, and currently we have a 1% measure in place. This would be a second 1% measure.
Which means we're doubling.
Increasing the local sales tax rate from 8.25 to 9.25%.
Are we, Solomon, are we doubling our regular sales tax? Yes or no? From 1% to 2%, are we doubling the city revenue that's coming in?
Yeah, we have 1% Measure V, and then the 1% that is proposed right now.
Right, so we'd be doubling. Okay, I just want to make sure it's a 100% increase. That's 100% increase. Okay, well, that's clear.
The
Okay, I wouldn't
extra revenue, apart
Yeah.
from the regular sales tax.
Right.
It is not a 100% increase. It is a 12% increase on the tax rate.
It's 100% local sales tax. In fact, I've got limited time, so we'll I guess two of your councilmen told me it's 100%. So I guess if you disagree with them, this is part of the inconsistency we see. So let me get back to the bigger thing that I want to have, because I want to stay within the 5-minute budget. Okay, so my numbers, and I worked this with a councilman, I also spoke with another councilman, but I really appreciate, both Solomon and Kyle's time this time. Our current budget is $19.1 million. If we increase it by $5.9 million, that's a 31% gross increase to the city. I mean, I'm not 3.1%, but 31% increase for revenue for the city when we're having, waste management issues. I mean, it just seems absurd to me that during these troubling times, like you said, the timing couldn't be worse. How could you possibly propose a 31% increase in total city revenue? That's gross city revenues. Oh, yeah, as long as it doesn't eat my time up yet.
Well,
Yeah,
I'm sure it'll eat your time up a little bit.
Okay, you'll extend it a little bit.
It's easy, because your city council has been presented with a large number of problems. Matter of fact, what's that? Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
Yeah, I don't want my time getting eaten up, so just...
So your city council's been presented with problems. Staff comes to city council and they go, look, you have problems, this is how we fix it. So it would be irresponsible of us to not present something to the voters to vote on. It's a pretty simple. Well, look, it's a pretty simple statement. I mean, so you're saying, how could you? How could you? Well, it's very easy how we could. If your city council, I mean, going back years and years and years for a very long time, I mean, these issues that facing the city is, I said it in the last council meeting, back to the 90s, 80s, 70s, when was the city was incorporated in the 60s, 68?
Well, I'm just trying to clear the numbers up, because I've done a lot.
No, Chuck, you asked me to comment, so that's what I'm trying to say.
Okay.
So this is why your council all said, yes, this should go to the ballot. These issues aren't going to go away. When the economy stabilizes, when things stabilize, when life changes, our issues are going to remain the same.
Correct.
Those aren't
I'm
going
just
to
trying
go
to get
away.
the numbers out there clear that everybody understands that there's a 31% overall increase in gross revenue for the city if this, with the citizens, because, we had this discussion too with the public reach out, for the city. I really think those are really great things, but I think if we really want to be transparent, it'd be very appropriate for the city to put out there on all their nice pages, hey, we really are proud of this tax we're putting out there, and we just like all the citizens to know that this is 31% increase in gross revenues.
But Mr. Rowland, I want to add one thing. It's not something we are imposing on the citizens, though. We are giving them a choice. We want to give them an opportunity. If they want all the facilities, if they want to increase, if they want us to increase the quality of life, we are asking them if you want to vote for this or no. So they have a choice to say yes or no. So it's not something we are imposing on them.
Correct. Yeah. I'm just dealing with the numbers, not trying to, because obviously we'll have a lot of time to discuss other stuff. Because some of the misinformation's out there, which I think people need to know. And so and then again with the topic on these here, I just want to. The main thing that I'm trying to do with this is, does the city really, with the waste management issue, with the GA issue. I mean, and obviously I get different people, that send me stuff. I mean, there's this one lady that says she can't feed her dog. I mean, these impact regular people. And I just, and if you're talking 3.1%, 5%, but 31%, that just, in fact, I did do some research. I've only spent about an hour doing it. I've looked through California as long as I can to find it. In fact, if anybody can find where a municipality increased their revenue by 31% gross in one event, please, that'd be a great research project. Because I've never seen it. I looked and tried to find out the highest increases that any city has had, and I can't find it.
Yeah, I think it was Lancaster actually is above us right now.
It was over 31% in 1 year?
Yeah, they increased to 10 point.
Yeah,
10 or 11.
he's talking about a percentage rate versus the actual interest rate. LA County is well above, so is the descent.
Oh, yeah, no, I'm just talking the increase, okay.
And
yeah.
each of them applied to the state for an exemption to go above what the state law was in order to continue that increased percentage.
Oh, yeah, no, I know we have the state law thing, which is, in fact, I'm going to try to stay under my 5 minutes. I do want to make one comment about what you did really good, Mayor, appreciate it, is, the 5-minute rule should be consistent, because obviously I heard, I've read about 4 hours of public comments over the last, 4 or 5 days, and I see real inconsistencies that are, and actually I'm going to give you the references I told you, Kyle.
I'm just laughing because that's a lot of time to spend referencing.
Yeah, well, I get
public comments.
Well, it really is, because I want to be informed. I just don't want to come here,
okay.
yeah. And I told you I'd provide you the information. That's why I do it. But yes, I really looked at all these. And the 5-minute rule, which I'm going to come to now, just like last week, and Mr. Whitnick came up here with 5 minutes and 40 seconds with no interruption, was great, okay? And that I have no trouble with. But the one that really troubled me was on May 4th, here at the City Council, a person named Tommy that you referred to as your friend, Mayor. You said, and Tommy.
Say who was again?
The date, you got all look at it.
No, who the name was. You just said the name.
Tommy? I just want everybody to go back and review it, 5-4. All the city councilmen should review it. But this is on the 5-4 city council meeting. I want everybody to look at it. In fact, I really want the city attorney to look at it. Because the thing was, this was a public comment, and the city actually did a pretty decent job on that, but that person was allowed to talk for 12 minutes and 25 seconds. The first interruption came at 9 minutes and 40 seconds when the beeper went off, and that's after the mayor had said, hey, Tommy, we've been friends for a long time. Quote, you guys can all read that. And then at 9 minutes and 40 seconds, the alarm went off, and the mayor actually stated, don't worry about that, at 9 minutes and 40 seconds, which was interesting. And then at about 11 minutes and 50 seconds, I think it was the city attorney came in and said, gee, this is public comment. And then we were at 11 minutes, 50 seconds. And then basically they went, these are just off my stopwatch, about another 40 seconds, about 12 minutes and 25 or 30 seconds. I'd like you to review these, Kyle and Sullivan.
I didn't review it, so I was there, Chuck.
Bird.
It was a guy trying to
Yeah.
fix an
We're
issue.
trying to fix his cell phone tower, trying to save his business.
Right.
We spent some time with a local citizen trying to save his business. You're correct.
I agree with, and I agree with the context, but I agree with the consistency. The point is, if you said, hey, this is Chuck Rule and I'm your friend, I'm going to give you you 12 minutes and 25 seconds to talk about the fire thing because we just had a 40-minute presentation, then we want to cut you off in 5 minutes. I think we either need to be consistent. That's what I'm saying. And I have some more of those I'll present to you at future meetings and stuff, but consistency is really good. If we want to do 5 minutes, like, I'm going to get off here now, but I just think that consistency is really good. I'd like you to review that because I promised you that, Kyle. I'd give you that stuff. So
that's okay, man. I mean, so I gave you my opinion. Remember, you asked
Oh,
me.
yes.
My opinion was, if I was a mayor, I'm not. If I was a mayor, I would run this. It would be 5 minutes. Boom, 5 minutes. And you have to do that because if there's people lined up, it's just disrespectful.
Well, no, there actually was people lined up at that time.
I'm sure.
Okay. Hey, thank you. I've exceeded my time. I just want everybody to review that because I promised I'd bring you that information. So thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Oh, man. So Rika doesn't have a beeper.
Yeah, I know she doesn't have a beeper.
Hello, everyone. I'm just here to ask about the trash service with waste management.
Mm-hmm.
I'm really concerned because we have a lot of citizens that are not going to be able to afford, to pay that monthly fee, however they pay it. So I have called waste management asking myself, I wanted to downsize my trash can.
Mm-hmm.
I was not allowed to do it because it was opt-out from the city of Ridgecrest. My other one was, I asked if we have senior citizen prices, and they said they did, but the city of Ridgecrest actually opted out from that too. So I want to know what really is going on.
Sure. Can I give you a comment back on that?
And also, can we
real
just
quick?
have your name for the record?
Mariella.
Mariella.
So Mary, I talked to Waste Management today, and then I also went back and looked into it. So I don't say I guess, but I've only been on the council for 2.5 years. But going back with the contract, the city was never really given the option. The city didn't look after an option for a senior citizen discount because, whether it's senior citizens or disabled vets or anybody getting a discount, that discount is now shared among the whole community. So what the city at the time thought would be a good idea is, okay, it needs to be uniform. Now, I was told that citizens are offered 3 different sizes of cans. So I don't know about that piece of information. Like, that doesn't seems like you can definitely downsize. We know that the cost of increase for SB 1383 was somewhere around $5 to $10, depending on the size of your can.
Actually, it's a lot more than that because we're paying like $59 right now, and it's going to go up to $72.
Is that?
Yeah, that's what I was told by Waste Management. And
so
the other
Waste
thing,
Management told you that?
Yes.
On a quarterly basis.
That it was opt-out from the city.
No, I was saying that increase on a quarterly basis.
Yes. But this other thing, I wanted to downsize my trash can. Well, I'm not allowed to do it because I'm not over the age of 60. It's like, why would I have 19 gallons and I wanted to go to the medium size?
I know there's 3. I was told there was 3 options.
Yeah, but I called yesterday. They're like, nope, you're actually Monday.
Who did you call?
I called the 800 number, Waste Management, and she would go back saying, oh, well, let me check and see what's available in Ridgecrest.
Let me go ahead and say ahead of time, I was contacted by Waste Management today, and they will be here to field questions at the next council meeting. If there are some, well, their local rep will be. But I'll let City Manager Strand address that also. There are more options than that.
Okay, so I'm really concerned about our seniors. I mean, they struggle so much because they're on a limited income. So I think we should do something more for our seniors because we have a lot of seniors in Ridgecrest. My other thing I would like to do is, I still have some time, sorry. Illegal dumping. That would be something that we need to talk about in Ridgecrest. Our city is pretty, but it's becoming a trash place. We go walking with my husband, and everywhere in the desert, there's illegal dumping. I think that should be an ordinance.
It's an issue. So,
yeah, it's really bad. I'm sorry. And what else? My other stuff? Street cleaning. I mean, there's a lot of cars out there that are parked, are never moved. When we get the sweeper around our neighborhood, we can never have our street, clean all the way because there's cars parked outside that don't even have legal registration now. So I think our city needs to start doing something about that.
But that's valid. It's a code violation.
Yes, and I mean, I see it on my street a lot. There's cars that have never been moved, maybe for months, years. Also on the main streets, like Sunland, there's boats, there's like trucks that have never been moved. And that's really a concern for me because when I pull out of my street, sometimes I can't even look out to see if I'm okay, pulling out.
please do reach out to code or just, call the regular number for the police because it's, those are issues. We know we don't have enough code enforcement officers. We just don't to go around the town.
So
We
I
have,
think I'm sorry, that should be brought up in our next meeting whenever you guys need to talk about, because it needs to be something that, our Ridgecrest is pretty, but it's becoming a dump.
Yep.
Thank you so
One of
much.
the big challenges is staffing that code enforcement position. We actually expanded the code enforcement position with the, when they made the changes to the Kern County landfill. We're looking to expand code enforcement further, assuming that the measure was supported by their citizens. The hardest challenge we have is staffing the code enforcement position. The second hardest challenge we have with code enforcement is that we have a portion of our community where we have asked them to bring their properties or their homes into code, and they have, shall we say, defied that option. And the next option requires, a substantial investment of both legal effort as well as punitive effort, and that has been on more than a few occasions problematic.
Yeah, just down my street, there's like desert, and just up the way from there, there's a neighbor that basically cleans out his backyard and goes and throws it out in the desert. So, so I really appreciate for your time, and it would be something that we could probably bring up later.
Yeah, I would encourage you also to reach out to Kern County Board of Supervisors, because understanding if they're driving out into the desert, they're actually illegally dumping within the county, not within the city. Obviously, if they're dumping in the city, we are absolutely 100% supportive.
Yeah, it's just in the
But I would
city
still
itself.
continue to address that at the county level, because that is part of their enforcement as well.
Okay, thank you so much.
Yep, and as a note, if it's on BLM land, reach out to the regional office. They actually will take a grid coordinate if you tell them where it's at, and they'll go respond to that. Get it picked up.
Tom Wignick again. Real quickly, with the recent social media kerfuffle about race communications used in the council chambers, and it was finally answered that they paid to use the services. Of course, the answer came from the city of Ridgecrest, and again, we don't have any idea who is actually answering it, just the city of Ridgecrest. And so who is speaking for the city of Ridgecrest would be nice to say, this is from John Doe or something like that, so we know. But the real question I have is, how much did they pay? I never saw that come up on social media. What was the cost? What did they pay?
I'd have to look it up. If you want to contact me tomorrow, I can get you the amount.
Okay, do you have any idea?
I don't have an idea. They paid way in advance, so I'm not sure. I'd have to look it up.
We know we paid the full amount.
Yeah.
Okay,
So-
and I'm not questioning that at all. I'm just wondering what the number is. And is there any policy that the city has on who can rent the space? Because I know it was mentioned that, well, MediaCom could use it, or MediaCom could rent it, and other things. Is there a policy on who is allowed to contract to use the council chambers and the TV station and everything else? Is there a policy on that?
I don't know if we have a direct policy, but I think it's a judgment call. And in this case, I will say that I supported race using our facility and putting information out to the public, because I do know that Travis Reed and I do field a lot of questions on the activity the race has in the community, because as you know, they are putting poles up within the easement, they're boring under the road, they're cutting out concrete. So anything that will help the public find somebody to talk to have these questions answered and answered in a timely fashion. And also, in all frankness, to have feedback going directly to race, so when they have their subcontractors out there doing work that they're not aware of, it gets addressed much quicker. And yes, this is a huge build out in the city. We're talking fiber optics throughout the entire town. This is a significant upgrade for our community. And so, of course, in that regard, yeah, I would support it. I think I wouldn't be doing my job if I told them no, and it found out that people had the ability to come ask questions about what's going on in our town. So I think it was a good judgment call on our part.
I'm not challenging
But
your
if you're asking me
decision.
if there's people I'd say no to, yeah, probably.
Yeah, I'm not challenging your decision.
I mean,
at
would
all.
I let somebody have a rave party in our council chambers? No.
Well, how about a candidate for office that has a whole bunch of money and says, hey, can we use the city hall to do a town hall as a candidate campaign? What would the decision be on that?
Oh, that's a good question.
I think if they paid, I mean, I think we've had entities that have done.
I don't mean debates. I mean just one candidate saying, hey, guess what? I'm going to have
I'd be frank with you. That would be a question that I would bounce up to our legal and ask, Martin, whether or not that'd be appropriate. That probably would not be something I'd make on my own. But that would probably, I would seek legal advice on that.
Yeah, I mean, I probably couldn't afford it, but I'm just saying, who's making that decision? And if the decision is totally...
It's ultimately my decision, yeah. And in this case, this allowing race to come in was absolutely my decision, and I think it was a good decision. Now, to allow other entities in here, I guess it would just depend.
Okay. Well, then could I get an answer about, say, a candidate asking for the facility? What would the answer be?
The answer would be let me check with legal and I'll get back with you.
That'd be fine. Thank you.
So Tom, I'll also add to that you asked for a procedure, and generally people call the Kerr-McGee Center and ask for a room, depending on the size and their needs and what they want. Narissa and I have conversations on where's the best place to put them. They specifically asked for a forum with microphones and what they needed and wanted it broadcast. That was one of the reasons we considered it here. But generally the procedure is they call Kerr-McGee first and try to book it over there.
Okay.
And based on their needs, Narissa and I have conversations.
Okay, very good.
Scott Miller, City of Ridgecrest, 341 East Wilson. There's a price breakdown of all of those services, if you want to rent Kerr-McGee or this. So, Mr. Strand, there kind of is a policy, is we have prices that are posted. So if someone wants to rent it, it's all written out on how much everything is. So it's not a willy-nilly. So there is a policy of how much is Kerr-McGee, how much is this, how much is the TV. So I think, and I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, obviously, Mr. Strand, but there is a policy in place and of who, what, and when, not of who, but take out who, what, when, why, where. Basically, how much it is to be at any one of the facilities. However, if it's a rave party that I really wanted to have, thanks. Other than a rave party, but if someone wanted to come in, like a candidate, and wanted to have a town hall meeting, assuming that legal said yes, and he or she paid for that, sure, why not? There's a price breakdown. There wouldn't be a discount, just like Race did not have a price discount, I'm assuming. There's a price breakdown right there on the right there. So that's all I had to say is there is one. It's just all written down. Thanks.
Yes, my name's Mike Neal, and I've already had lead in on the two subjects I wanted to bring up. I'll start with the waste management and the current fee structure, which they clearly have started actually charging our citizens as of July 1st. So we've actually been being charged that, although we haven't got the bills for 1 month. The problem with that is that we're not going to get the third can or the extra service until sometime, January, supposedly. So we get to pay, thanks to the agreement that the city made with Waste Management on our behalf, not with my agreement for sure, but on our behalf, unfortunately. We get to pay for it for 6 months, but not get the use of it. Which means, of course, that the Waste Management is getting to finance their cost out of our pocketbooks, so they can then turn around and continue getting 30% more from us for the trash service. Something that most people probably aren't aware of is that the city gets a franchise fee from Waste Management. So on top of Waste Management getting, and I didn't include this number, they're going to get about $450,000 from the citizens of Ridgecrest over the next 6 months that we get no service for. The city itself is going to pick up about another $45,000 in franchise fee just for that period. Over the year's time, they're making another $90,000 on the franchise fee that they get. So they're not without some motivation to be agreeable to Waste Management, in that they do have this profit to and increased income into their
revenues for this, so just so the public's aware. As far as the proposed supposed sales tax that's been put out as well, if the citizens choose to fund it, we don't really get much of a choice. We either vote for the full 1% or we go for nothing. Now, I pointed this out, and it's worth pointing out again and again and again, which I plan to do, that the city does have a budget surplus every year. They have for some time, and it's $3 million plus. Well, the cost for the fire contract has been stated to be $1.2 million. Now, that's not starting next year. That's actually starting in 6 years. So the city's going to get another $3 million extra dollars they don't need for the fire fund expenditure out of our pockets if we vote for the sales tax, when in fact they could pay it out of their budget surplus. So that's $1.2 million down the hole you don't really need, you've already got. And then of course the pool is a big thing, a big emotional push, probably only used by about 10% of the city, but I calculated financing the pool cost over 9 years at 4%, which you could probably do better, and it comes to $1.3 million for that time. Well, your surplus will cover that too. So why is it that we need to pay 1% when, of course, you throw in the whole laundry list and you say, oh, we need it for streets, we need it for police, we need it for everything under the sun, but it's not specific, it's general, but you want a full 1%, you want $6 million more from us in a time of the highest inflation most people have seen. I saw it years and years ago. People younger than myself have never known it to be this high. But now, more tax, please, more tax, please. They can't be reasonable and look at operating from the bottom line and doing the best they can with the money they've already got in their hands and say, well, maybe we need 0.25% more or 0.5%. Every time it comes up, we want another 1%. And I could told you years ago when they started to measure what was L then, it became V, that they were going to ramp it up to 2% for the city. And here we are. Well, if you're going to go overboard, sorry, you don't really deserve anything but a no from us. And that's sure what you're going to get from me.
Any other public comment from the floor? Seeing none, is there any public comment on the phones? Seeing none? We'll go ahead and move on with our agenda. First item is council announcements. Do we have any council announcements? Scott?
Just want to welcome Chief Jed back. Pray and wish you good health and long life. So thanks for being here. And then I want to say that I attended the Planning Commission and happy to see that they considered EV charging station on the corner of Chena Lake and French, right? It's 20 EV charging stations of level 2 and 3. So this is the first of its kind in the city. So that's a good addition, and they have given, Planning Commission have given the Public Works Director authority to go ahead and give the permission subject to the traffic study satisfactorily done. So that's a good addition to our community. So that's all I have.
Kyle?
I'm trying to remember the exact date. I think it's, oh geez, if Isabel's in the crowd, is it August 18th? We're going to try to have a community outreach event. So
August 18th is the ice cream, right? Is that what you're
well, yeah, we just want to make sure we're getting together on a routine basis, and that we just maintain getting holding events for people to come out, talk with the council, talk with the staff if that's what you need. Outside of this more structured environment is a city council meeting.
Correct. It's Thursday, August 18th between 3 and 6.
And that'll be in the gazebo area.
Gazebo, splash pad area.
Gazebo, splash pad area.
Right.
Okay. Next is our consent calendar. All items listed on the consent are considered to be routine and non-controversial by city staff. Consent items may be approved by one motion if no member of the council or audience wishes to comment or ask questions. If a comment or discussion is desired by anyone, the item will be removed from the consent agenda and will be considered in listed sequence with an opportunity for any member of the public to address the city council concerning the item before action is taken. I will now read each item. There is one. Item number 2, which is proposed action to approve the draft minutes of the Ridgecrest City Council regular meeting dated July 20th, 2022.
Hey, Mayor Bruin, do you have a collar on? Is that why the lights are green? I'm not really sure what.
Do I have a caller from public comment?
They're saying yes.
So this was a late caller to public comment. Is that correct?
Yeah,
That's what we
I
think,
think they were on as we moved on.
I
Hit
looked
that
at,
lag.
they were calling it right at the same time. Okay. Well, again, I'm more than happy to go ahead and let it occur. Go ahead. We'll go ahead and reopen public comment and allow the gentleman the opportunity to speak. Gentleman or lady, I apologize. Caller, go ahead.
This is Ronald Porter. My comments, they're talking about the trash service again. And the most important thing we have to do here is, this is the state of California that's taking and deciding that they can make the people buy labor that they want. Our ordinance here in Ridgecrest on that is an equal protection, because certain apartment people can haul their own trash, other people can haul their own trash. But the most important part here is our founding document, the Declaration of Independence, and Article 4 of the United States Constitution says we shall have a republic form of government. The burden places on each and every one of you to go to the state and say, where in the California Constitution and the federal Constitution does it grant you the authority to do that? It's not there. And you each took an oath of office to go to the state and say, where is it? I went through the California Constitution. There's nothing there. There's nothing in the federal Constitution. And this sounds simple for when you talk about trash service. But can they mandate that I have to pay someone to wash my car? Can they mandate that I have to pay someone to mow my lawn? Can they mandate I have to pay someone to cook my dinner? Where does it end? And the fact is, it doesn't end anywhere. I mean, do we want a Stalin for a state government? You all have a duty to go out there and say, where is your authority? And if you don't do it, you're violating your own oath. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for the heads up. I do apologize for that oversight.
Well,
thank you, sir.
Thank God for Rick.
I didn't see it. And I did look up and check the lights, but it must have been coming in right at the same time.
No worries.
That's a reminder for that 30-second pause. Okay. Again, we have not approved I did not have a motion for the consent calendar as of yet.
I move that we approve the consent calendar.
Do I have a motion? Do I have a second?
Second.
Please vote. Five ayes, motion carries.
Okay, next item is item number 3. This is discussion regarding the board of the Indian Wells Valley Groundwater Authority. Mr. Heyman.
Thank you, Mayor. So we have not had our monthly meeting. That will be next Wednesday on August 10th. We did have a special meeting, though, between the meetings this month, and for 3 items that we wanted to discuss and make action on before the next meeting. So beginning with item number 5, agenda item number 5 was authorize award of contract for the imported water pipeline alignment study. So this entails the pipeline going from Indian Wells Valley Basin south and with what's called AVAC, or Antelope Valley East Current Water Agency. So we approved the business Prevost and Pritchard to perform this study, and so they will get started on that. And the study itself at this stage will be composed primarily of a design of infrastructure, environmental compliance, or CEQA, and rights of acquisition, along with plenty of other items. So once they have started the process, we'll have more of a line item, to date, list of exactly what they're doing. But so that was item number 5. Agenda item number 6 was authorized release of requests for bids for monitoring wells and drilling services. That pertained to the Rose Valley area, there, we approved drilling of a well in that area, which is also known as the Little Lake Gap, and so looking at subflow into the basin. It's for one well, but with possibility or looking at maybe a second well down the road if needed. But so that was approved also. And our third item that we covered that day was authorize water resource manager to prepare water recycling feasibility study for United States Bureau of Reclamation funding. So basically, what that entailed was the study to gather data that is required to allow us to be putting in for additional monies that we can apply for grants. So that was the 3 items. It was a quick meeting, and we did approve those 3 items. So that's all I have.
That's all you're going to say?
No,
We're gonna
I have
talk
one
about the
more
water?
item to say. So last meeting, we did, it was brought up that we have been looking at purchasing imported water, and that we had a letter of intent that had gone out with the parties involved in the purchase of the water. And so I'm happy to say that we now have a signed letter of intent, which brings us further along into this purchase of imported water. So anyway, we are moving right along with that, and hopefully we'll have more good news as we move on into this following month. So I'm pretty pleased with that. We were told that we wouldn't have a GSP that would get passed. We were told that imported water purchasing was a pipe dream, and but here we sit today. We have a passed GSP. We have a purchase of water that is looking very amenable, and we also are looking at a pipeline study for infrastructure. So I think it's exciting things. I think continue to say and believe wholeheartedly that water sustainability for this valley, for everybody that lives here now and that wants to live here in the future, is a top priority for this valley. And so we continue to work toward that goal. So thank you.
Thank you, sir. Are there any questions from any other council?
I do have one question. That 750 acre feet is per year, forever?
It is permanent.
Permanent,
correct.
Per year?
That is correct. So one thing I'd like to talk about that, since you brought up that particular item, Solomon, is that when we started this process and when I got on board, it was my full thoughts looking at the overall picture of water in the state of California and the pressures that were being put on the basins, from critically overdrafted basins to the standard overdrafted basins, that water was going to become a hot item, an expensive item, a contested item, an item that would be bought and sold and get, depending on demand, would become harder to get and more expensive to get. This same ranch sold water back in approximately
It was 13 years
ago.
13 years ago, yeah.
And,
13 years, yeah.
and so at that time, from 13 years to today, that water has gone up 55%. We are one of only a handful of basins that were approved for the GSP in the state. With that, there are going to be, it was, 77 or close to 80 other basins that they were falling in behind us a year later to have their GSPs approved. So as those other basins, which are many of these basins are larger, they have more funds, they have more equity to work with, these basins are going to be coming on board now and jockeying for water. So it's imperative that we continue to move forward at a efficient, fast process and continue to follow through on this. But I thought it was pretty enlightening, the price that we're paying for water when you look at other purchases that we sought and looked at and compared to on the out on the market. That's about where it's at, and it happens to be about where the replenishment fee fund was set, that meets that level of cost that will be incurred to purchase water. So, but it's only going to go up. If it's gone up that much with this amount of purchasing that's going on, when we look at another 5 years, 10 years, or if we kick the can down the road for 20 years or 30 years and we don't do anything, we are going to be in a terrible mess, one that I don't know that we would be able to pull it out. Not to interrupt you, but please go ahead.
Sure. So when do we plan to, I know it's only letter of intent we signed. Do we know when we plan to close the escrow, approximate time?
I will find that out, and I'm sure next Wednesday we'll probably discuss more, I'm sure that topic will come up, or at least I'll ask and
Okay.
try to find out what kind of a time frame we're looking at closing. I know we were wanting to report back on the bonding and the escrow, and the, bonding of the purchase, and we were hoping to have that by August also.
So
we'll
let's
see.
say, sorry, go ahead.
No, that's it.
Okay, let's say we close the escrow in 2 years or 3 years, approximately. We don't know yet. But we don't have the infrastructure to bring that water here. So we still have that table A water of 750 acres available for us, right?
Accruing where it sits.
So
Is that what you're asking?
then, are we allowed to sell that to somebody
We could sell that water anytime. We could sit on that
till
water.
we get the infrastructure and till we can get that water down to us?
Right, and so water banking and storage is what we'd be looking at initially. And then depending on where we go with our pipeline, if, things are feasible and we move to the south and work with Antelope Valley East Kern Water Agency, then that's where the fine dealing of how the water will be moved and a proper setup. So, but that would come, that's kind of like behind the cart right now.
Thank you, sir.
You're welcome.
No questions. I went back and watched the meeting. I was happy to see that you guys approved getting some monitoring wells in there to see what's coming out of Rose Valley. 'Cause I know we have estimations, but more data is always better.
Yep, and just so everybody's clear, when Councilman Blades talks about Rose Valley, it's the Little Lake Gap.
Sorry.
Because at one time I did think it was a little further east of the Little Lake Gap, but it's
Yeah.
not. It's pretty much the Little Lake Gap. So there's.
Interesting. Okay.
Okay. No other council comment? Any public comment?
Evening, Council. Scott Miller, 341 East Wilson. I think you said 750 acre feet. Is that what I heard? I didn't hear the number.
Yes. That's correct.
So 750 football fields, 1 foot deep.
Well, that's the
That's an acre
analogy
foot.
that's used quite often is.
That's an
yep.
acre foot. So
Yep.
it's a football field, 1 acre deep.
Yep.
And and I may have missed it. What's the expectation of that to be brought to Ridgecrest?
The expectations?
When will our feet get wet?
When would it be? Well, that would be dependent upon the infrastructure and finalizing the
So-
ability to move the water.
Okay, so,
And
okay,
that,
so we have.
I guess
we
you
have-
could say, is that water, a lot of people wonder, is that water actually going to be moved to here? Well, not in the sense of, that exact water. There's going to be transfer of water. That water would be,
we like
technically say
Put into
moved.
the aqueduct and then we can pull it off the
Correct,
aqueduct type of thing?
through the.
Does that seem like would be pretty
It's not
easy?
so much the aqueduct, but more like imagine that, you have person A that's got 1,000 and they're going to give 500 to person B.
Right.
And person B is going to give 500 to over here, and then person C is going to give 1,000 back to person A.
It's moving.
It's
Moving
moving
water.
an asset like you would move any other.
Yeah, the water market is wild, man. It's a wild, wild place.
Did I understand that a pipeline, is that what I heard you say?
Correct.
This is up in Tulare County is last.
No. We're talking, the feasibility study for the pipeline was for Indian Wells Valley, this basin, the Indian Wells Valley groundwater basin, to just past, or approximately to Cal City, to the Antelope Valley East Kern Water Agency.
So I'm sorry, I'm confused. So the pipeline we're talking about isn't coming from the Tulare County thing that
No,
we're talking
sir.
about?
No, sir.
So
That's
this is
water that
coming
we've
from-
purchased. They have means and measures within the state that people can buy water, sell water, move water within the system that they currently have.
Okay.
And that part, well, like I said, would be worked out at a later date.
And, okay. And, sorry, what is a GSP?
Groundwater Sustainability Plan.
Okay.
So every basin, a designated basin in the state of California
You were
has
saying
to have
basin. Okay.
Right, because the basin includes
I get
a
it.
segmented, portion of geography. Right.
My
and-
hearing, I was hearing the word base. I'm like, what's a GSP and the base have to do with anything? But groundwater sustainability, got it. Delivered pipeline, acre feet, and it's not a I don't think it'd be a possibility to actually truck water in from either one of those places.
No, that would not be a feasible option.
And what is and again, I may have missed it, what's the price point on this 750 acre feet of water?
6.3 million.
Yeah.
6.3 million a year, a month, a day?
One-time
Total purchase price, because we're buying permanent water, so it's a one-time purchase.
So it's one and done?
One and done.
Oh. Okay. And that 750 acre feet is every year? Is that what I'm understanding, or is it just one and done?
Correct. That would be permanent water right.
So continuous?
Continuous.
Continuous up to 750 acre feet. So you turn a water tap on, 750 acre feet, and water turns off. I'm being very simplistic on that.
There's some limitations to that.
I'm being very simple on that, but that's...
Right, because it's based on availability and table A water.
Okay, very well, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other public comment on this topic? I'll go ahead and hold 30 seconds to allow for the phones. Okay, I'm hearing none. We'll go on and move on to item number 4. Item number 4 is a resolution of the Ridgecrest City Council to appropriate a portion of the American Rescue Plan Act funds for the KMCC partitions and flooring. Marissa.
I think we got to click down.
Good evening, Council. I have a little presentation to show you guys too. So back in November of 21, we brought a list of projects to use for appropriations for the ARPA funding. So tonight I'm bringing 2 of those projects back to you for approval. They have gone to the Quality of Life Committee and were discussed there. That was in last month's meeting. So tonight I have the partitions and the flooring, and the flooring is in the banquet hall at the Kermagee Community Center, and the partitions are the ones that are used to separate the gymnasium from the banquet hall and also split the banquet hall in half. Both of those areas, the stuff in there is original to the building, so they're over 20 years old. The partitions are, this is the banquet hall, so you can see the flooring. You can't really see the rippling as well as you can in person, but you can see where it's damaged. Lifting is a tripping hazard. There's gashes in it. It's separating at the seams. And then those are the partitions. So with the flooring, when I first came to you guys, the quote that I got was $75,000. Due to inflation rates as of July 1st, I got a current estimate, which was $76,250. The partitions, you can see, are falling apart. They're very hard for staff to move them into the pockets that they go into to open up the area. They constantly slide on the gym floor, causing scrapes and indentations into it. They're just in severe disrepair. When I originally came to you guys, my quote was $845,000, and due to the nationwide inflation as of July 1st, the estimate came in at $869,411. After speaking with the company, I was told to add a 10% contingency for that, just in case some hardware needs to be changed or materials. I did provide you guys with an updated resolution and staff report noting those changes in it, and there's also extras up here at the podium if anybody wants to see it. So the total quoted cost for both of these projects is $1,032,603. And I would like you guys to keep in mind that 10% is a contingency, so if we don't use that full million, the money will be there and it'll go back into the ARPA money that's there for other projects. So both of these projects will be completed using a pre-negotiated purchasing contract. Myself, our Public Works Director, Travis Reed, and City Manager Ron Strand will be making a couple of trips to check out a couple of partitions that the company I've been working with has already installed in different locations, so that we can make sure that the system that we choose is what's best for us in the facility. The flooring that we plan on putting in is actual laminate tiles rather than a solid laminate piece. So that will allow us to maintenance it as there's problems with the tiles. We can replace sections rather than having to go in and replace the entire floor. So with that, staff is requesting City Council to approve the ARPA project and authorize the Finance Director to allocate funds from the ARPA allocation and allow City Manager Ron Strand to sign the contract. Do you guys have any questions?
Thank you, Narissa. So we'll go ahead and start again with Peggy. Any questions?
The only question I had is there's no ability that is either economical or doable to repair what we have.
No, I did ask them, and due to the fact that
Okay.
it's so old.
I can see how old they are, and many times as we've used the Kerr-McGee Center, I can see where they're falling apart. And so thank you for trying to repair rather than replace.
Yes.
Scott?
So the flooring is original flooring, right?
Correct.
From 1989?
And so are the partitions.
And the partitions? Yeah. So 33 years?
About.
And so which is a long time to have something last, I mean, for the most part. The product that we're looking at purchasing, is it in a comparable quality level of, product to last us, another 25 or 30 years?
According to the company, yes.
And then, so my second question is, knowing roughly that we have that amount of time, on that current flooring, and this might be a question more to city manager or the, council, but is it possible for us to have a side fund that we put money into over the next 20 years to offset because this is expensive, I'm sure it's only going to go up even further, but to offset, a project that we know is coming down the road. But I'm in favor of doing this, don't get me wrong, I'm just looking at this.
Yes, that's correct. We are looking at trying to start a capital improvement fund. But as you know, with our budget in the past, we had very little reserves in the past. We're to the point now where we need to be for our reserves to have, 6 months of the general fund in the bank. And then thereafter, we need to start establishing some of these capital replacement funds for our vehicles, our road equipment, capital improvement with the buildings. We still have, one of the projects that we're going to have to address in the next couple of years is the roof at the Kerr-McGee Center needs to be fully replaced. It's 30 years old. I think we're going to be able to patch it for a while, but that's one of those other larger projects. So when you looked at partitions or roof, the partitions went out, one, because of our liability. Two, we're able to keep the roof patched so it's not leaking. But this was the primary thing. But yes, you're correct. We do need to do that. I do believe Cherie is bringing a capital improvement fund to council to establish the policy and to begin to set aside some money for that.
You had my ears burning, I guess, all right? Thank you. So, okay, that's all I had.
Yeah, we're holding off on the capital. We asked for some rewrites in finance, some little ones. Narissa, how often is Kerr-McGee used for public functions for the community?
I would say the Kerr-McGee Center is rented out, all 12 months of the year. The banquet hall specifically is rented out, I would say, about 10 months out of the year, every single weekend.
So there's something or someone who's using or getting an impression of our community nearly every weekend.
Yes.
Or multiple events, sometimes during the week, as well as economic outlook conferences and Navy days and all those types of things. And those happen, consistently, we could say, for 45 of 52 weekends a year.
Correct.
Plus some. And every time that they're going in there right now, this is what they're seeing.
That is correct.
And This is a reinvestment into, likewise, we did the Wi-Fi into Kerr-McGee in order to make that facility technologically capable, being able to support what we need. And this is another method of making sure that our impressions as far as our city center, as far as our primary location for large gatherings within the entire community of the city of Ridgecrest meets the standard of expectation. This would make that improvement, correct?
That is correct.
Okay, thank you.
This is already brought to us in November of 21, I think, right? So
Yes.
with the total package, and we agreed to do this. So I don't have any questions on that. Other than, and it went to through the quality of life?
Yes.
Okay, so you vetted?
Yeah, this came with quality of life committee recommendation.
Okay, so that's good. So, yeah, this is something we need to do. So I have been there so many times. It's a tripping hazard most of the time. So I'd like to get this thing done. But suggestion is, we don't know how much is spent. So whenever, in future, if these items come for our approval, if we can have a spreadsheet showing this is what we spent from the ARPA money and this is how much is left, that would give us some idea what is happening and how much is left, what we can do in the future.
Okay.
So question to the finance. So the 50% remaining is we already got in July? Okay, so and that is sitting in general fund? Okay,
Well, it's sitting to a
No, it's
special
not sitting in
account.
general fund.
okay.
Yeah, it's not general fund money, it's sitting in a specific account for ARPA.
So that would be in the budget or no?
It was not, we did not budget these
I know we did not
projects
budget.
in the budget because we promised council that we had that initial list that council had tentatively approved. We told council we'd vet them back through the Quality Life Committee before it came back to council for approval. We did meet yesterday, and we are going to provide council a spreadsheet on where we're at, what we've spent, what money's unobligated, because we do plan on bringing additional projects to council. So you should have that here probably by next week. We can email that to you guys. Okay, Finance
Okay,
Committee, got it.
good. I'll be there. That's all, Narissa. Thank you very much for what you do. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks. All my questions actually got asked. I guess I got a quick one. I guess I'm gonna look past you to Shri. Does that ARPA money, does it expire?
24.
Yeah, it has to be spent by 2026.
Okay. And I guess I didn't think about this. I'm always keep my head down looking at the trees and stuff, the forest. Did we stop to explain or talk to the public leaders who are sitting here? Does everybody seem to understand the ARPA money, how it got here, why we have it and why we use it, how it got racked and stacked? Because I think that was something I was going to ask Narissa that Solomon alluded to. That, all these projects came back in, I believe it was November. We did maybe before that, we did a town hall. We asked people for their recommendations. We engaged with the public to see how this specific ARPA money that was given to the city, how we were going to spend it. And then the staff has went through, racked and stacked, and then the staff comes back to the council saying, hey, does this seem like a good idea? 9 times out of 10, we're like, yeah, staff knows what they're doing, of course. So just so everybody knows what's going on, why that money is being spent the way it is, and what the purpose is.
And we've already, there's portions of the money that's already been spent, and then there's portions that have already been approved. So if the public, again, just for public record, the tennis courts has been approved. We did the
We
vehicles.
purchased a new water tank.
We did the
for-
water tank. We approved the roofing for multiple locations in local parks.
We did the
We
Pearson Park
did
lighting.
vehicles. We did.
HVAC.
The lighting at Pearson Park.
The lighting at Pearson Park. Yeah, no, I'm just making sure. I'm just remembering. I know what we've already approved. I know which ones we haven't. We haven't gotten to. There's a whole laundry list, but guys, we haven't gotten to the baseball fields yet because we kind of shifted gears with the DCIP grant, which was fantastic and another great opportunity. We haven't done the restrooms in Leroy Jackson Sports Complex yet. There's still a pretty healthy laundry list. I know that there's going to be people out there to see. $1 million and it's rehabbing and refurbishing Kerr-McGee, and they're like, well, that's all the money just going to, no, that we've been allocating this in chunks, and I would encourage anybody who wants the details, we'll be happy to, or go back and look at that November meeting. There was a fairly comprehensive report provided with all the individual items that were identified as problems, and then staff was given the time to say, okay, we know we can finish this project on the time frame.
Yep. Nope. I just wanted to remind the public what we were doing with the money and why it was there. And I appreciate you bringing this one forward. This is more deferred maintenance that we need to quit deferring. So I appreciate you looking into it, doing the hard work.
Yeah, that's the deferred maintenance is the big issue is again, if we don't have a way to accelerate, and one of the things that we're able to do right now is accelerate some long-term deferred maintenance, which was unattended. And I mean, guys, there is a ton of unattended maintenance in this community. We don't dispute that at all. And we're trying to, as quickly as possible, get it into play. Okay. Is there any public discussion? I hear a phone. It's loud. Caller, state your name. Caller, go ahead.
Hi, good evening. This is Kathy Brown calling in. I just want to say I do support what you're doing with the money with the Kerr-McGee Center because it really does need improvement. And during the earthquake, I remember our community went there and we felt very safe. It was a good place for all of us, even though I did see a couple cracks in the walls. So you really do need to upgrade it. And I'm really happy that you're spending the money in that regard. So I thank you for listening tonight. Thank you.
Thanks, David.
Thank you, ma'am. I don't see any other comment on the phone. Any other comment from the floor? We'll go and bring it back to council.
Make a motion to approve.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a motion and second.
That the motion is made with the amendments, please.
The motion,
Oh, the amendments and costs. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, so I'd like to make a motion to include the amendments to the resolution, which is a 10% contingency increase.
Thank you.
Yep.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you.
Please vote. And thank you for clarifying for me. 5
Thanks,
ayes,
Marissa.
motion carries.
Thank you, Narissa. Okay, item number 5 is a resolution of the City Council of the City of Ridgecrest establishing additional fees for encroachment permits. Mr. Reed.
Good evening, Council. First off, before I get into my presentation, I just want to say I think the capital improvement fund that Finance and Council is looking into is much needed because we haven't talked about the public works elephant that's in the room, and it's coming. We get a lot of grant funding. Sooner or later, California is going to tell us that all of our sidewalks, curb ramps have got to be ADA compliant, and that will be a huge amount of money to do.
Yeah,
So-
I would say, one of the things that I know was mentioned inside the measure on the items that we certainly are looking at is curb and gutter, especially as relates to ADA, because if we don't get it to compliance, we're going to run into some significant problems in the future.
Absolutely, and I think that you'll know one of the big things that the state looks at and the feds look at on federal funding is you have to have measures in place for ADA grievances. You have to have measures in place for how you're handling your sidewalks and plans for how we're going towards them. And one of the reasons why we've gotten so many of the grants that we've gotten is because we were one of the few cities that has a transition plan, that has, I'm going to call it a QAP because that's what we call it, but it's a quality assurance program that has some of these reports that you were required to have. So it automatically weeds us out from the other cities when we apply for these grants, and it takes a pool of 500 cities down to a pool of 30 cities, and you've got a lot better chance of getting this grant funding, and that's why we've seen this increase in grant funding over the last few years. So, and like I said, it's going to be a big overhaul to do what they want to do, and if you want to keep being able to get your grant funding, it's coming. So.
Thanks for being proactive.
Yep.
Appreciate it.
So anyways, on to my item. This is more of a house cleaning item. Back in, I'm guessing on the date, so don't quote me on the date. Back in 2015, they implemented the moratorium street list and basically setting a 5-year cap on streets when that you can't go into a street. If you do, there's additional fees, things like that. During that process, our encroachment permit process our encroachment permit fee list kind of got overhauled, along with the cost of service study that the city had provided to them. With that, there's been some additional needs that have come up. We've had items that were listed in the study, but were not added to our fee structure. And it was an oversight on my part. Cherie asks us every year, almost routinely, almost like she asks us to prepare our budgets routinely, but she asks us routinely to look at your fee schedules and make sure your fee schedules are up to date. They have everything you need, everything you need. So these were things that did not get identified at the budget time that we felt we needed to identify. For those things, the major thing we wanted to do, as you guys know, we added a curb and gutter staking line item that contractors can choose to utilize and have city staff go out and stake curb and gutter. In doing my calculations for that, I put in a lineal foot cost of $9.25. So that includes our time in the office, researching as-built, setting up our alignments, doing topo out on the site to make sure that we've got our falls to gutter, things like that. What I failed to think about is what happens if somebody comes in and says, hey, I've got 125 lineal feet that we want you to stake. So the initial work is covered in the office by that $9.25 per lineal foot, but the additional is just adding 3, 4, 5 more stakes. So it's calculating 3 or 4 more points. It's really not that much more work. Of course, there's a little bit more time. You've got the time in the field, you've got the things like that. So that justifies some cost, but definitely not a $9 cost. So the first one we got was for 125 lineal feet, and I did the calc based on what we did, being all bright-eyed and bushy-tailed and happy that we could provide this service. And when I saw the total, my mouth dropped. So we're asking that basically that we can reword our engineering fee to say that it is $9.25 for the first 55, and then it's $2.75 a lineal foot thereafter. And that I feel is we're gonna win some, we're gonna lose some. Obviously, we've got old as-built, we might find issues, we might have to do some design work, we might have to figure something out somehow to make it work, but I feel on all that is a fair cost to the public to provide a service to aid our contractors and developers. Next, when you look at our utility companies, we have an emergency utility work fee, which is a $40 after the fact. You guys come in, you fix your thing, you let all the emergency services know that you're doing whatever you have to do, and it's a $40 encroachment permit that we usually bill quarterly. What we did not have in there broken out separately, although we had been charging for it, but it wasn't listed on our fee scope, was what it is if you had planned work to go into one of our streets. So we added a line item for the planned work, that it's basically a $300 fee for their encroachment for let's just say the one that I know the best, Water District. They've got services, so they've got 20 sidewalk panels they have to pop out, so you've got inspection on those 20 sidewalk panels. So it's just a fee to cover the cost of our inspection time when we're in the field, looking at sidewalk panels that were replaced, verifying patching, making sure those things met our requirements and stuff like that. And lastly, on the building side of things, the county and Wildan, and now this is not to target mom and pop that is out there that's trying to work through a permit, trying to figure out when I call for inspection, what I call for inspection. But when you have a developer that's doing 50 houses and knows better and is trying to utilize the inspector to tell him what he needs to do and what he doesn't need to do, when he fails an inspection, the city incurs a cost because that inspector is going back out there. So, and with that inspector going back out there, we wanted to have the ability, obviously just as staff discretion, so we don't have to hurt mom and pop, hurt the people that are trying to do things on their own and to better the community and better their facility, but to say, hey, this has become overbearing. We feel that you're taking advantage of this, and there's going to be an $85 fee every time you get a reinspection. That covers the cost for our front counter to input the additional inspections, work with the inspector on what times they need to be there, things of that nature, plus covers the fee that we get charged from those inspectors for that inspection. And that is all I have, if you guys have any questions.
Okay, we'll go ahead and start. Thank you. Mr. Reed? Peggy?
No, thank you.
Scott?
None.
I don't have any. This is perfectly reasonable. And once again, it shows that we're not just sticking to what we've always done, but rather re-examining what it is we continue to do. Solomon?
Yes, I don't have any questions.
Okay, but Kyle's there for us.
That's right. So that's what I'm here for. Just in general, I know you know the answer at length, so I'm trying to preface that a little bit because sometimes you and I go on a bit. I don't know if we've got that reputation. Who is impacted by the fee increase?
To be honest with you, I really can't see anybody being impacted because they've already been paying, like the utility companies, for their planned, obviously, and let me kind of clarify, especially the utility company one. If it's a city planned project and we need them to do something, or a utility company is being proactive, going into a street before we are paving it and updating their infrastructure, that's a no fee permit. Absolutely, no fee permit. You're doing this so we can better our community for our people. I 100% in support of that, as I think all you guys would be. Other than that, I really don't think it's going to impact anybody. It's just going to make people do their jobs, especially with the reinspection fee. And I mean, we're providing a service. I felt it was absorbent, so I'm coming back with you to say, hey, let's get this in line with where it needs to be.
Yep, no, it seems like good housekeeping. I appreciate that. And then my last question is, I see that it goes into effect for fiscal year 22 to 23, but is it just going to go into effect immediately?
So that's exactly, so
Okay.
did I write 22, 23? Isn't that the one we're in?
Yeah, that's one we're in.
Roger that. So that's
I
what I'm
guess
saying, like, is it immediate?
I guess, and you know what, I should have, my action requested, I should have said that I would like council to let us have the finance director amend the current budget based on this resolution, and I failed to put that in. And I don't know, and maybe that's a question for Martin, I don't know if that should have been in my resolution. After saying that now, I know that's not in my resolution.
I don't know, we can pause and make the change. Martin, is that required?
And I'm sorry, I missed the point. What was the
Says
question?
whereas will be adopted for the annual budget.
Yeah, for 22, 23. So if the permit fee is going to be adopted for fiscal year 22 to 23, we know the intent is to go into effect immediately. Does that need to be stated or be a part of the resolution? Does it need to be amendment, or is
Yes,
it just?
It should, if the fees are to go into effect immediately, it should say so.
Otherwise, it'll be 30 days.
Yes, so the resolution, Martin, the wording on our resolution is whereas the resolution adopted the annual, well, yeah, so it just basically I was stating that the annual budget's already been adopted. So we need something in there stating that whereas this fee and these new engineering fees and items will go into effect immediately.
Simply in the same, and I'm looking at the resolution, simply just after encroachment permits, in that second whereas, and will be effective immediately.
Thank you.
Cool. Okay. Any other questions?
No further questions.
Any other public comment? We give a few seconds for the phones. Okay, we'll bring it back to council.
I'd like to make a motion that we approve the resolution with the discussed amendments for the fees that go into effect immediately.
Second.
We have a motion and second.
Thanks, Mr. Reed.
Good job,
Thank you.
Travis.
Thanks, Travis.
I'm sorry.
These things, I don't know who.
Okay, that brings us to the end of our action items for this evening. Next will be a committee report, and I don't think any of our committees have met yet this month, if I'm correct.
No, it was supposed to be infrastructure, but we had to move it, just didn't have availability to this Thursday.
Yes, City
The
Org
4th.
and infrastructure are both occurring tomorrow. If I'm correct, yes? Mr. Sharon, I believe that they're both occurring tomorrow, correct? Because we're both on different committees, so I don't think there's any overlap because you and I are City Org and, yeah, yeah. Okay. Are there any other boards or commissions? I don't believe there are any.
I have Kern Cog coming up next week in the 18th. Yep, that's it. Oh, it's hard to keep them all straight.
East Kern Economic Alliance met, I believe RACVB may have. Did they have their meeting at the end of July? That we haven't reported on?
Third Wednesday.
So did we, and we reported on the last meeting? Maybe I just don't remember it. It's fine. It was a long meeting on the 20th. Okay. Again, any other committees, boards, or commissions? No? City manager report?
Yeah, just a reminder of the Let's Talk meeting on August 8th from 3 to 6. We will be providing ice cream to the kids. 18th? Yeah, 18th. Did I say something else? Probably. Oh, sorry, I meant 18th. Anyway, that's all I have to report.
Okay. Put my sheet down. Of course I did. Future agenda items. Does any council member have an item they wish to have on the future agenda?
I would like to ask a question. This issue of public comment and times and things like that.
Does it remind you of anything?
I think I'd like to see that nailed down a little bit. I know when I was mayor, because I wanted to respect the 5 minutes that people had to speak, we never responded to their comments during their 5 minutes. I think we need to look at that and say, if we're going to respond, write it down and respond afterwards. Does it need to be an agenda item? I don't know, but I would like to see us find a way to respect their 5 minutes and not give them 15 because we've spent 10 of it explaining to them.
I can work with Martin on
Their 5
that.
minutes is done. Am I wrong in that, folks? Or
I-
is that a more efficient way of accommodating their need to speak and wanting response?
I don't think you're wrong. I think as I understood it, legally, we're allowed to ask clarifying questions. Like if you say, hey, I got a problem. I got a light out on the corner of Bowman, and you go, okay, well, just Bowman? What intersection? You're allowed to ask clarifying questions, but you're not supposed to have an interrogative. You're not supposed to have a discussion. You're not supposed to dive down deep. I understand that we're not supposed to do that because then you're in danger of talking about stuff, that hasn't been agendized, and the public isn't there to discuss it. We have probably played a little loosey-goosey tonight and went a little further, and I'm probably just as much to blame, so I apologize to the public for that. But you're right, Peggy. We should be more structured in that. So.
And I don't know how to do it, whether we just simply do it, or do we have to establish a policy to do it?
As I understand it, it's the policy's set and it's the mayor's meeting, right? I mean, isn't that how it works?
Yeah, and the policy exists that came out of casino all those years ago. And again, I've tried to allow us to have dialogue with the community, and I would certainly put on as a future agenda conversation, because if I am failing in that role to be more disciplined or to further need to restrict the amount of time, then so be it. I will be happy to listen to this council. I think the best intentions of the entire council is to provide people an opportunity to speak within the limits of what the opportunity is. Presentation is got certain limitations. Public comment has certain limitations, and we are trying to be reasonable. And if that is not going to work for the public, we can go ahead and certainly be more constrictive.
Well, many councils, when I first became mayor, many councils I looked at sometimes had comments as little as 3 minutes, and some had, you made your comment and you couldn't come back and make another comment. It was one time and that was it. And so I just wanted us to understand what public comment is, because I think some of them are commenting and some of them are asking questions, and there's a difference in how we respond to that. So I'm going to leave it to the mayor, because clearly it is his choice.
We will redefine it. Because you're absolutely right. There's been a growing amount of questioning from the the comment point. And that's not the floor for questions. It's, if there's questions, they certainly can be directed to the council or any member of our city staff, and we can certainly address them at any time. Another possibility that I've seen and was discussed and avoided was there's many councils that put public comment at the end of the session rather than at the front of the session.
Exactly. Most
councils,
did.
most
Most
councils
of them did when I did my research.
Yeah, and that's to allow for the efficiency of the business of the city to be ran before public comment. So, we've tried to leave it in there for the sake of allowing the community to come in early to be able to answer and respond. And we have been, I freely state that, I've been loose with that because I really want to have a communication. I think communication was agreed upon by this whole council as a priority for us, and we've tried very hard to make the improvements on that, and okay, fair enough.
My opinion is that as things are going, generally, it's good.
Yeah.
Because, one thing that you get in other communities and other towns, they do. I've watched other council meetings. Go to Santa Ana, sit through a council meeting, right? 3 minutes, you step up, you get cut off, there's no more voice, you step away, and it's not a small town community like we are. We're a community that we allow things to be run a little bit looser, but that also means you feel a little bit closer to your council. You get to discuss things that you normally wouldn't get to discuss. And you're the mayor, you shut it off when you want to shut it off. That's up to you. If there's criticisms, then that's...
Yes, fair enough.
That's up to you. That's over to you.
Any other future agenda items? Okay. Mayor and council comments? Peggy? No. Scott? Done. Solomon?
Want to make a comment on the public comment? No, seriously, yeah. See, we have so many issues going on. It's a very crucial time for this community. So they have so many questions. They want some answers from us. So, it's only my thought though. So why don't we give, I'm not saying give unlimited time. So give more time. Instead of 5 minutes, can we do 7 minutes? So, depending on the timing, because there are so many issues, and we are asking the community to engage in a conversation. We are going to have so many meetings at different places, but when they come here to talk, probably we should give them more time. Specific time, 6 minutes, 7 minutes.
I very rarely disagree with you, Solomon, because I think you're a brilliant dude, but this is one case where I'm going to disagree with you, because I think that, there's a reason why it's not 3 minutes, because 5 minutes is more appropriate. If we went to 7 minutes, well, then 10 minutes might be more appropriate. I think eventually we have to set it, here's why I say that. It isn't like the public does not have a chance to talk to their council members. Correct. I have a cell phone and a text message chain, and Facebook message chain and emails chain to show that people do engage with us. And now I know that this is a good forum to talk to everybody, but then, okay, maybe people don't just want to talk to me. Well, that's what the committees are for. Yep. Well then, and those committees are run even more loosely than these are. I've had people sit down and talk for 10, 15, 20 minutes just about a single topic. So in this specific instance, I apologize, Solomon, I'm disagreeing with you.
I take your apology, without any offense.
Okay.
So,
but your point is taken, because right now things are contentious because of a certain amount of topics. People need to discuss with us things. So that is why we're also doing these community outreach events. We know this is going to be a tense period in time, so we would love for you to come out and talk to us. This isn't me pandering. Please come out and talk to us somewhere. That's what we're here for. Go ahead, Solomon. Sorry. Didn't mean to take over your time.
Your comment is over.
I'm done.
It's still your mic, Solomon.
No, I'm done.
Oh, you're done. Okay, Kyle?
Oh, it's my turn now?
Yeah.
All right. Real quick, so we talked a lot about fire, and I wanted to cage the public on why we got where we are. It took a lot of me sitting in City Manager Strand's office and him sort of drilling me and pounding it through my head on where we got where we're at, going through the numbers. But to put it in a nutshell, we weren't paying our fair share. That's a nutshell. The city of Ridgecrest was not paying to the county for a service was being rendered near enough money. And I think that needs to be put out, because it's easy to lose sight of that. There's a reason. It's also, the public should be very aware that when the county was going to be happy with just giving us a number and moving out with it, it was the city managers that got together collectively and put a stop to that and brought it back to the negotiation table. And that negotiation went on for a long time. This looks like it's just come up all of a sudden. Not true. That negotiation went on for a very long time. So if there is a corner or a shadow to have been just, to look around or to study, that's been done by the city staff. So and that isn't aimed at you, Chuck. That's really just to the general public. That I think that everybody needs to understand that this is not something that was it was not lightly done. I mentioned it in our last meeting. When Mick Gleason was leaving, one of the last things he said to me was, "This is going to be a tough one for you guys. This is going to be rough." I said, "More than water?" He said, "Yeah, I think so." So, I mean, that says a lot there. And then also, it was mentioned that the city has a surplus. So this is sort of a side. I know we're in comment. Right, we're in the comment section, but that's worth addressing. Right now, we know that the base is rebuilding. They're investing somewhere around $3 billion to $4 billion on the base. We know that there's a lot of people in town, and we know there's an influx into the city. That is not a permanent influx. Also, we see the economy. We do not expect the city to see the amount of surplus we see now. At least I don't. I have two people in finance here that could correct me if I'm wrong. City manager. So I don't think that is something that we can count on, nor do I believe it's responsible to count on a up and down surplus. It just happens to be hitting the city. That's another thing that I think is worth noting. So the city council did not lightly bring something to the ballot. It wasn't flippant. It wasn't, hey, let's go try to drag some money out of the people. I'm part of the people. I'm one of those folks being affected. And I meant what I said earlier. I believe it would be irresponsible of us. Matter of fact, if I was the public and I got it 5 years, 10 years down the road, and I'm like, hey man, who was addressing these problems? Well, it wasn't the council back in 2022. They were too busy. They were being unwilling to address the public and be honest with them. So this is me being honest with you. We have issues to face. If you choose not to vote for it, it isn't like that I'm going to think any different of anybody.
Right.
You made your choice. But be aware of what that encompasses, what it means. It's not, we're not taking these issues lightly, and we hope that the community doesn't either. That's really the overall point. Back to you, Mr. Mayor.
Great words, Kyle. I'm going to go ahead and reiterate, some of the things Kyle just said in many ways, which is, we all are feeling it. Nobody's enjoying, what we're seeing economically and what we know, I jokingly was communicating with a former city council member who is leaving our community, and I said, if you think that anybody on this council wanted to have trash, a tax measure, and the economic conditions at the same time, you are sorely mistaken. And when you come back to visit and you find me as an alcoholic divorcee, you'll understand why. And he just chuckled, and it was the internal joke of there's no way to conceptualize the level of stress that's applied in trying to make, the best decisions for a community. And the best decisions for a community are often the hardest decisions. Because our goal is to not service one specific sector of our community or one specific group or one specific need. It's to serve the entire needs of the entire community. And then I've heard people say, well, that doesn't apply to the county. You're right, it doesn't, because the city boundaries and the city citizens, I've been elected to serve for the city of Ridgecrest. And right now, the best move for the city of Ridgecrest was the renewal of this fire agreement and the terms that were negotiated that protect our public safety. It's the terms of this proposed ballot measure, or not proposed, but this ballot measure which you citizens will have the opportunity to vote on in the coming months. And you guys are going to have a choice for how the road for this community moves forward. I mean, we are making changes and improvements. There's an incredible number of things that we've accomplished in just the last few years. But we're not going to be able to continue that road of continuous improvement, capital restoration, making sure that we can not find ourselves in the position where we have 8 police vehicles sitting of need, or Kerr-McGee and the need that it has, or Public Works and the needs of equipment that they had. We're about to put $6 million worth of road work out. in the next, 9 months or something like that?
Next month.
Next month. I mean, guys, we have been working our backside off to get the city moving as quickly as we can. And the decisions to put forward the waste management agreement, the decisions to put forward the proposed ballot measure, if you think any one of us, is making those decisions because they're easy and we're just out to get something, easy and out to get something is to do nothing. I mean, it's real easy to do nothing. It's real easy to say, I disagree, I don't want, I don't. No is the easiest word in the American language. The hardest word is yes. The hardest word is we're going to commit. The hardest words are we're going to find a way to make this work. And we've done that as a council, and I'm very proud of our efforts. When you talked about some of the other things in the surplus conversation, we are down 4 officer positions. We are down 4 support officer positions. The needs of public works, I mean, I am amazed at the amount of work that those people do with the level of staff that they have. Economic development, 10th Street, because they've come and gone. And if you think, again,
Repeat what he said.
he just said that he's going to be hiring his 10th street maintenance worker because of what the level of turnover has been over the last 12 months. And I mean, I will testify to that too. I've turned over 7 staff people in our business over the last year. Staffing is as much a challenge for this community as anything else. I could go on a diatribe. It's too late. I'm not intending to do that. But the fact is that if we are going to recruit and retain and build all the things that we want Ridgecrest to be, and we're expecting to do it on, the revenues that we have had, it's not going to happen. And I'm going to go ahead and address something I went and really stuck my foot in this week, okay? And I'm more guilty than anybody else on this council for trying to actually say what I feel and say what's at my heart and say what's on my mind and then just taking it. And I, on Sunday night, saw this story about the Indianapolis police officer, and it really hit me hard. And it hit me hard because I have an 11-year-old son. And what hit me hardest was the idea that I would not recommend to my 11-year-old son to get into law enforcement if he wanted to serve his community. And my first thought about was, why would I not? And the reason was because the first thing that we try and do is find a way to not pay the people that protect our lives and property. Not because we don't want to pay them, but because we are constrained by a budget or constrained by this need or constrained by that need. And this community has done that over and over again. And if we want to preserve the level of public safety and the level of quality of life that we all love, then if you love public safety, you are going to have to get behind this measure because we're not going to be able to protect public safety without it. As we stated in this conversation, just imagine, Kyle corrected me to the 12% number. I mean, that's, I can only imagine the first time a family member loses somebody because we chose to not promote both stations or not to promote public safety. And I'm not going to be that guy that says that's okay. I'm going to make that hard decision, and I'm going to stand up here and take the slings and arrows and the bullets and everything else and say that hard decision is what this community needs.
That's what we were elected.
That's what we were elected to do, was to make hard decisions and to disagree with people.
Sorry.
And that's what we're going to try and do. So with that, I wish everyone a wonderful Wednesday. We will see you again on the 17th of August. Everyone have a fantastic evening and good night.